They don't care about facts. Having all the facts in the world doesn't make a difference. Being right doesn't help in terms of like the rhetorical battle. I feel so in conversations like this, I feel like the main thing you need to do, you need to get all the being right out of the way, and then you need to get to like the hard hitting shit. You know what I mean? Or like blood sports or whatever you want to call it. The idea being like responding to their points, dealing with statistics. This is just an off the cuff, like, let's get it out of the way kind of thing. And the rest of it is like you challenge them directly. Does that make sense? You know, very aggressive, because you don't want to come across as the stereotype that they put out there, some kind of academy indoctrinated wit who has no emotions whatsoever and exists purely to regurgitate statistics. I certainly have disagreements with Rose Wrist, but I have a lot of respect. I know nothing going into this. Godspeed.
All right, so today we'll be debating the Great Replacement. Each person can have about 5-minute opening. Then we will have open discussion. At the end, we will do a Q&A from the audience. So if you guys have questions,
it's their mic. It's their shitty.
PowerChat.live. We will ask those questions at the end, and we'll do closing statements and final thoughts after the Q&A. So I guess we can get started with opening statements. Mark, did you want to get us started?
Now it's a bit loud.
I can certainly do that. Right. Well, when I was asked to participate in this debate, I asked Brittany, the host,
are these people Nazis? Yes.
Exactly what this debate was about. And I was given 2 different points in a text message that she wanted me to discuss. And both of these points relate to the issue of demographic change. Now, the first issue I was asked to address tonight was, is the Great Replacement real? Well, the Great Replacement, or white genocide as some call it, is the process whereby people of European descent are being replaced in both their ancestral homelands or the nations that their forefathers founded. This phenomenon will lead to those
it's a real lineup
becoming minorities in places like the US, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom by the end of this century. Now, I'm not really sure what there is to debate about this, because the Great Replacement is not only very well documented in terms of statistical evidence, but as human beings, we can also observe the world in which we live. And observable reality clearly shows us that white countries all over the world have experienced increasing waves of mass immigration, which have already transformed cities such as London into places where the indigenous people are minorities. But let's look at the UK figures as a whole on demographic replacement.
I'm sorry. It's so funny how they appropriate colonial terminology or whatever, you know? I swear to God, it's not going to be long before like the, you know, the like left flanking types or whatever are screeching about how you're pro-colonialism, like on Africa to Europe or something. I swear to God, if that hasn't already happened, it probably already has. Let me move my mouse so I can turn the video back on. I can't.
As they're very illuminating. In 1950, there were fewer than 20,000 non-whites in Britain, the vast majority of whom were first-generation immigrants. In other words, they weren't born here. These people made up just 0.04% of the population.
Sounds like shit.
By 2011, the time of the last census, the non-white population of Britain had risen to over 8 million and accounted for around 13% of the population. To put this into perspective, in just over 60 years, the non-white population of Britain had grown over 400-fold, and since 2011, immigration has only increased. The trajectory is clear. White Britons will be a minority by 2066 or sooner. Now, some may say this is a natural phenomenon, and others, like myself, say that this is...
Remember, the ultimate defeater for this is the fact that the definition of white makes this a mathematical inevitability, no matter what you do with the world, okay? Because if a person who's white and a person who's black have sex, their kid is considered black. It is mathematically impossible for like white people to like perpetuate their existence at like a... So in spite of that fact, the percentage of white people has, I think, gone up with time, like for the whole total world population, or at least the total number relative to others. At least it's stayed fairly consistent. I forget, it's been a while since I've looked at the fucking numbers. But like, given that, like, yeah, eventually there will be like far fewer white people, of course, because you defined it in such a way that interracial relationships will produce more of other races and less of white people. Totally arbitrarily, but that is what you've chosen to do. So, yeah. I don't think that's true. I don't even care. Who the fuck cares how many white people there are?
Something that has been planned and accelerated by the establishment, supported by the media, and furthermore, I contend that those who have campaigned against such demographic changes have been vilified and even criminalised. So really, it's impossible to credibly argue that such a replacement isn't taking place. The only thing we can reasonably debate is whether this replacement has been a net positive or a net negative for people of European descent. And I would argue that the consequences of this replacement for white people, especially white Britons, has been, on balance, profoundly negative. Whether this has affected Indigenous Britons through falling wages, through rising house prices, or through the destruction of our countryside, mass immigration, the resulting growth in the population of these islands, and the replacement of the Indigenous people has led to numerous negative outcomes, not least the rise in crime, the rise in terrorism, and of course the sexual assault, rape, torture, and sexual trafficking of more than 100,000 British girls at the hands of migrants. But believe it or not,
the groomer gang shit is total bullshit. Look at Lonerbox's video.
Minority. Whilst white people are constantly told that minorities must be given special privileges and a leg up, when white people become a minority in towns and cities, they do not benefit from their minority status. They receive no protections and are often treated appallingly as worse than second-class citizens. And the establishment and the media are regularly complicit in covering up crimes against white people that are perpetrated by those not indigenous to the British Isles. If white people are reduced to minorities, they will not be celebrated and protected, but instead they will be a hated and despised minority that will be repeatedly blamed for all the ills and all the failings of the multicultural state in which they live. Thank you.
Where the fuck am I?
All right. I guess we can go back and forth. So, Mouthy, you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have much of like an opening statement because obviously me and Roserist aren't really taking the affirmative in this debate, but sort of, I guess, just with respect to my general position on these points, I would say that with respect to whether or not demographic change is happening, it obviously is, but I don't think that's really the debate. I think the debate is more, is this natural or, you know, I guess when Mark frames it as, is it natural or is it planned? That's a bit confusing to me because no doubt, whatever our stance on immigration policy is, it's going to be planned, right? Our immigration policy is set intentionally, right? Whether we have open borders or closed borders. And so when it's framed as planned or natural, I guess I'm not really sure what that means. I guess what the question that I would focus on is the intention, is the motivation for allowing in migration, this idea that we need to erase white people or something like that. I think that's an implausible story. I just think there are a variety of more plausible explanations for why people might support immigration. I think it carries certain economic benefits and so on. And then I guess with respect to whether or not white people, the consequences for white people are on net bad. I don't really buy that the consequences are on net bad for white people. I mean, I think immigration brings a variety of benefits, higher rates of innovation, higher rates of economic growth. The stuff on wages, I think, is a little sketchy. Mark didn't really present any mechanistic argument or any data in support of his claim. Of course, it's the case that when migrants come in, that increases the supply of labor, which might drive down wages. But it's also the case that migrants also increase demand for products, which increases demand for labor, which drives up wages, which is why generally the literature on the relationship between immigration on wages shows that it's at worst like a wash. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there are a variety of benefits of immigration. I think that all of the sort of negative things that Mark...
So far, I don't think Mouthy... By the way, I obviously I really dislike Mouthy, but well, we're always fair and impartial in our debate reviews. I think Mouthy's opening here is fine. These are the points that I would make. I think, having had arguments like these a decent number of times, more and more I'm starting to think that the best opener is to go on the offensive, you know, because what the Nazis want to debate is like all this bullshit peripheral stuff, like job rates or whatever. They don't give a fuck about that. They don't care. Nazis don't care. You think these people give a shit about economics? Come on. No, they think black people icky. Like it's just like they hate and disgust of black people. So I feel like a goal should be, and it's not easy to do this because if you do this really, really aggressively, like you come off like you're trying to push the issue, but I feel like a goal should be to be like, okay, look, all the data on this is out. It's basically settled. Like we know the facts, and the facts are it's just flat beneficial for a country. This shit about crime and job rates is just completely made up. Immigration is fine. Let's get to the real issue here, which is why you hate black people. You know, something like that. Of course, you know, there's not really a debate to be had there, because if they just say like, they'll just say like, well, I don't hate black people. I'm just concerned about the well-being of white people. You know, it's impossible to really move forward from there unless they're really dumb and they make it easy for you by saying something overtly hateful. Well, more overtly hateful than this, I guess, but you guys know what I mean.
Or Laura would point to, such as increased racial tensions is obviously the big one that Mark was mentioning. I mean, we just have a lot of data on the kinds of things that can go a long way to alleviate racial tensions, and those things include lowering racial wealth gaps, eliminating residential racial segregation, implementing more sort of integrating institutions. So, for example, there was a lot of data showing that when people live together with other races in college or universities, or when people work with other races in the military, that goes a very long way towards eliminating racism. And so, yeah, I just think that there are very plausible policies that we can implement to sort of alleviate these fears of racial tension and infighting. And I think that implementing those are a much better idea than the sort of, just implementing an ethno-state, which carries huge opportunity costs in terms of we'd lose out on a lot of benefits of diversity and immigration. And also it's just not very politically plausible or politically realistic to think that we would be able to achieve that.
Sometime, Kat. Hello.
Okay. Laura, are you, do you want to go last, or? I think we'll go to Rose.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so we had 2 points.
I have to pee. Tell me if the Nazis win.
We preserve racial demographics. And then to Brittany, are we going to have this as like 2 separate segments, or are we just going to do all of it in one uninterrupted?
I think we can just do it in one. I mean,
okay, yeah, sure. Okay, then I'll combine both of this. So on the Great Replacement specifically, demographics are changing. Yes, that's true, but that's okay. For white genocide and for Great Replacement thing specifically, what needs to be established for it to be considered a genocide and for the Great Replacement theory to be followed is you need malicious intent to harm white people. Just because policies are being put in place that do affect the demographics in a particular way, that doesn't mean that that's the intended goal of said policies. So for instance, during COVID, we had a lot of lockdowns that prevented, businesses that require in-person participation from functioning. Does that mean that there was a conspiracy from the government during COVID to run indoor mini golf like companies out of business? No, it's not the case, right? Because this is a consequence that obviously the state knew was going to happen. We know that certain businesses are going to suffer, but that doesn't mean that the point of the lockdowns was to make these businesses suffer and to have this unintended or to have this consequence in that regard. So once again, intent is very necessary, and I have not seen that adequately proved, and I expect my opposition to be able to prove that today, should they hold the position that the Great Replacement as is presented and white genocide as is presented is real. Furthermore, there's also questions to be asked about the motive for such a conspiracy. So a lot of people will often say the thing about how, hey, from the American perspective, Democrats want great migration because it benefits them in the voting. I think this is more of an issue with the political strategy for more right-wing parties than it is to do with migration as a whole, because a lot of minorities, they are very conservative, especially when it comes to social issues. So it's very possible for a lot of right-wing parties to tap into them as a potential voter base, and you even see the change of, for instance, Hispanic migrants, they're leaning more Republican than ever before. So I don't buy this as a motive either. That doesn't make sense. So I'm waiting to see another motive presented by my opposition in this conversation. Furthermore, onto the second thing here about whether or not we should preserve racial demographics.
This is actually one of the reasons why I don't like moderated debates, or like why I'm super bored by them these days. I feel like the format here offers so much undue legitimacy to the far right position. Like, oh, everyone do your opening statements, everyone take some time, lay out the positions, let's go point by point, But like, they're retards, right? Like I've done this a million times. Okay, their talking points are bunk. They don't like black people, right? I want, like, if they want to come on debate, I will, but it's just, there's so much of the, I guess, the rhetorical affect of just being mean. It's not even about moderating, Kat. It's more like even the 2v2 thing. There's just so much purported legitimacy, It'd be like if you were at a house party, right? And some asshole walks up to you and like deliberately spills a drink on your chest because they think that you were flirting with their girlfriend and you weren't. Like, you just like walked by her and they're a retard, so they thought that, or whatever. And you're like, dude, why the fuck did you pour a drink on my chest? And the guy who poured the drink in your chest is like, oh yeah? Well, you're Jewish. You're not Jewish. Not that it makes a difference, really. Like, you don't care, but you're not, And like, you're about to yell at the guy, and then a third person runs in, and they're like, hold on. There's no reason for this to get uncivil. Let's have a structured debate to settle your differences. And in your mind, you're like, there aren't differences. They're just an asshole, and I want to yell at them. But then it's like, no, hold on. So listen, okay, we're both going to take turns. Let's both take 2 minutes each to express our grievances. And like in your head, you want to die now because this has been elevated so far beyond what it deserves to be. And yeah, okay, do you get what I mean? Do you understand what I'm talking about? So does everyone here get me? Yeah, okay.
Racial demographics on their own don't really hold any inherent value. And through engaging in a wide range of policies in order to preserve that, we are missing out on a lot of way more meaningful thing that is going to impact people's lives in a way more material way. So for instance, there are questions to be asked about how this could even be accomplished in regards to potentially the curtailing of civil rights of minorities and non-white groups within Western countries today. That's something interesting that I want to see my opposition you talk about. But then there's also, like Malthi mentioned, the opportunity cost that exists with having a political system that tries its very hardest to prevent these types of things. We talked about, economic things, and there's a whole lot of other things we can talk about specifically as well. Things like social cohesion and the treatment of white people is also something that was discussed by Malthi a bit, how there's a wide range of different things we can do to minimize and prevent this from happening, such as curtailing segregation, improving economic equality. So I want to throw that out there as well. And yeah, this is something also that we'd be interested in talking about. But overall, there are issues that come with migration to some extent. However, overwhelmingly, migration and not having like an inherent value place on racial demographics and instead on focusing on what's going to give us the overall best benefits seems to be the better policy and the better mindset to have in regards to these type of things. And we should strive to maximize the positives of these types of policies while minimizing the harms. But a conversation about whether or not we should throw all of that out the window in order to preserve these racial demographics, in order to prevent these negatives that we see no really real evidence for, I think is a bit silly. And yeah, that's my overall take.
All right, Laurie back, or should we just...
She's not back, but I'm a husband. I've been given clearance to read her opening statement.
Okay.
I'll get started. I was invited here this evening to participate in this debate alongside Mark Collett and to debate the topics of whether the Great Replacement is real and whether we should preserve our racial demographics. The Great Replacement is a demographic replacement of European peoples or white peoples in their ancestral homelands or founding nations. So, from a British perspective, we're talking about the demographic replacement of ethnically British people in the United Kingdom. The fact that this is happening is undeniable. In the United Kingdom, we have a government census which is released every 10 years and which details information about the population of our country. The percentage of foreign-born people living in Britain was 0.5% in 1851. That's half a percentage. And that figure was very stable before and after that year for a very long time.
Didn't they already do this one? Did they have the same opening?
At the time that mass immigration to Britain began,
they didn't coordinate?
The percentage of foreign-born peoples jumps by 6 times to approximately 3%. By 2011, that figure was 13%. There are plenty of other figures we can use to highlight our demographic replacement. In terms of ethnicity, the white and white British share of the population of the United Kingdom, and in particular England, is dropping by around 5% per decade, a figure that will likely increase as contributing factors have also increased. The number of state school children of minority ethnic origin in England is around 33%, a figure which is increasing by around 1% every year. And the number of live births in England and Wales categorised as white British is currently only 58%, just over half. Again, this figure is dropping year on year. I'd like to add that although the statistics back up the predictions of nationalists, we shouldn't need statistics to prove what is evidently clear when we look outside our windows. Towns and cities are being overrun. We are already a minority in our capital city, London, and cities like Leicester, Luton, Slough, and now also Birmingham. Even cities like Bradford, in which we have not yet reached minority status, are beginning to feel like foreign countries where pockets of isolated communities have formed. Our demographic replacement is now so apparent that it is spoken about openly by those who support it. Our elected officials, the media, and political pundits openly brag about our diverse nation and how our countries are becoming more and more multicultural. In fact, our demographic replacement is only denied when it is spoken about by somebody who is against it. One example of this is the left-leaning Guardian newspaper, who published an article titled "The Last Days of a White World" in the year 2000. The article spoke about, and I quote, "We are near a global watershed, a time when white people will not be..."
Is any of this guy true, Vaush? These guys like constantly? The only thing he's really saying is that more non-white people are in Britain. Yeah, that's true. But like, it's drawn out into this fucking whiny, like, monologue that has to last a bajillion goddamn years. Whoops. Yeah, like the essential point here is like, nobody argues against the idea that more non-white people are present in England or America or what else. Like, nobody, it's obvious, it's right there, like, obviously, you know. But like, Nazis will just pour over how like no one's willing to acknowledge this. Well, everyone acknowledges the demographic trends because it's just people don't care, you know? Like what people disagree with is A, are they a bad thing? And B, is it part of a conspiracy to destroy white people? Well, basically it's a Mott and Bailey. What they'll do is say, I'm here to prove the conspiracy that people who hate white people, if they mean Jews, are trying to destroy the West by importing non-white people. And then what they'll do is spend fucking 8 hours saying, hey, did you know that there are like more non-white people in the West? Like, we did know that. Thank you. We did. But that's not the point you're trying to prove. You're trying to prove the conspiracy and the harm, you know? Yeah. I wish they just say Jews up front. Maybe they do later. Mark Collette and Laura Ingraham are pretty straight up Nazis. So.
Be the majority in the developed world, Britain included. Yet the same newspaper will call us conspiracy theorists when we share those same figures.
Where? See, he says
in terms
that.
Of how this affects the native population, we could talk about things like overcrowdedness, the environmental impact, housing shortages.
See, right there. See how he said that? He had a specific example of the Guardian newspaper acknowledging more non-white people in the West. And then he's like, oh yeah, and they call us conspiracy theorists when we say that. Where? Or is anyone calling anyone a conspiracy theorist exclusively for pointing out that there are more non-white people in these countries? Or did you say something else they said was conspiratorial? I don't know.
Hospital queues, the increase in certain crimes, the hate speech laws that have been put in place to stop us from speaking out in opposition, problems in the education sector and work-related problems such as racial diversity quotas across the public and private sector.
Oh,
However, nothing comes close in terms of the negatives to those intense feelings. However, nothing comes close in terms of negatives to the intense feeling of beginning to feel like a stranger and unwelcome in your own home. In Bradford, a city that I mentioned earlier, which has a large percentage of Pakistani Muslims, mosques have replaced the churches, the shop signs are in Arabic, the people
there are no more churches, there's no more English,
sneeze and foreign food, and there's an overwhelming feeling of us and them.
Foreign
These people
food.
do not want to integrate to our culture, not that they ever could. They want to replace ours with theirs. As our percentage of the population continues to drop, such
oh no, our British food.
The solution for our people is nationalism, a strong nation state where our people can be safe and prosperous and where we can have self-determination. I wish this for the British people and for all other peoples around the world. Thank you.
All right, so we can open up the floor now then.
Yeah, I guess we can begin with try to prove malicious intent with everything that's happening.
I don't have to prove malicious intent. The whole point of the Great Replacement is that it is happening. Statistically, it is happening. White people are becoming a minority in either their...
So this is a lie right here. Replacement is an act. Replacing is a thing someone does. The Great Replacement conspiracy theory absolutely indicates that it is being done deliberately. Yeah, prove these statistics are true. Well, no one cares about the fucking statistics. Doot.
Ancestral homelands or the countries or the nations in which they founded. What you're trying to do is redefine it to say that we have to explicitly prove malicious intent or it isn't happening. Well, it is happening. It's been proven. Even your little buddy there, the other half of Soy Squared, has admitted that it's happening. I mean, you two guys between
imagine talking like that and
like
calling anyone soy.
You're here tonight, giggling away, mumbling and stumbling through your intros, and basically saying, ultimately, what we are facing today is an unprecedented situation where white people will be a minority. White people don't really like it. There's plenty of social tension. But if we're all forced into one space and made to like it, that's going to be good because you guys say it is. And every time that's actually happened, what actually ends up happening is there is more conflict. Every time you force more multiculturalism and you force togetherness between people who aren't meant to be together, you create more conflict.
This is the opposite of the truth.
Your solution to more conflict is that we force you even further together because that will be the solution to the problem that you've created. So you can sit there, wring your hands.
So this is the opposite of the truth, of course. Areas that have more racial and ethnic diversity have less racism on average. By a good bit, too. The idea that like all the races live in harmony when they're kept separately is just not true. You can look at basically all the history of everywhere to find examples of this. The idea that if you keep ethnic groups living in separate areas, they won't fight with each other is really retarded. It's not just ahistorical, it's opposite historical. It's anti-historical. It's a ridiculous statement at the face of it, you know. It's comical. Like, this guy's from Britain. Like, yeah, dude, Britain was totally leaving those other ethnic groups alone for hundreds of years. Listen, okay? British and Indian people did not have any trouble with each other before Indians started moving into England, okay? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care about the rambling.
more.
I don't care about the rambling. So, I mean, you just said like that the evidence that I provided was because I said so, right? I mean, I can reference you like a large amount of literature suggesting that when races work together in like universities or in the military, this has a market effect on lowering racism, right? So, I can actually give you empirical evidence for this. You haven't really given me any evidence for the contrary claim. All you've said is, well, you've just asserted it, right? So, I mean.
No, I've asserted that statistically, white people are becoming a minority, which is true. And whatever learned report or big-brained theory that you've got on forcing people to live together and getting them to work together, it doesn't really outweigh the fact that in Britain alone, you've had hundreds of thousands of white girls raped. This is a rape epidemic that is being carried out by mainly Pakistani Muslim men. But I'm sure that's all okay by you guys, as long as you get all this wonderful foreign food. And I can't remember which one of you midwits said innovation. Well, I'm not sure what innovations we've ever had out of sub-Saharan Africa, but I'm really looking forward to them establishing a Wakanda, here in Luton or Bradford. It's not going to happen.
Okay, I'm going to cut in here. So just on the question I asked before and the answer you give. So you agree with me then that what's happening right now is not being driven by some anti-white racist bias? What's actually happening is that it's being driven by an anti-white. So there we go. We have malicious intent. So prove that to me, please.
But I don't have. That doesn't have to be proven malicious intent.
But if it's anti-white bias that's causing it, that means that it's driven with the effect and with the goal of eliminating white people.
It doesn't matter whether you hated the bathwater or not. It's been replaced with baked beans. The effect is the same. You've got a bath full of beans, which is
all right.
Yeah, so we agree on
the British mind at work.
Impacting our people.
Do you have evidence of malicious intent?
And your dancing around it is not going to change anything, is it?
Do you have evidence of malicious intent or don't you?
Just to jump in, if I may, the government know that this is happening because we know the figures. So
holy fuck them. It's fucking British voices. Holy shit. Yeah, so clearly he wants it both ways. Like he wants to describe a conspiracy, but he doesn't want to back it up. Yeah, obviously, because it's a very difficult point to substantiate there. I will say that this is an environment that I don't think that Mouthy Infidel and Rosewrist are well acclimated to. In the minds of Nazis, like they're like SDL would fall in this category as well, like they don't care about facts. Having all the facts in the world doesn't make a difference. Being right doesn't help in terms of like the rhetorical battle. I feel so in conversations like this, I feel like the main thing you need to do, you need to get all the being right out of the way, and then you need to get to like the hard hitting shit. You know what I mean? Or like blood sports or whatever you want to call it. Like with him, like it's really basically like, listen, there are plenty of studies showing that greater proximity between different ethnic groups leads to them being less racist. Also, the idea that different ethnic groups will leave each other alone if they are just in different countries is retarded. You know that's retarded. You literally live in England. You've been invading other countries for hundreds of years. Obviously, the conflict takes place. It's been getting less bad with time. And the last big conflict that you got into, by the way, was with Nazi Germany. So that was your fault. So anyway, your bullshit aside, like what's the problem? Like seriously, what's the issue here? Why do you mind fucking kebabs in the street so much? Explain to me, something like that. Like the idea being like responding to their points, dealing with statistics. This is just an off the cuff, like, let's get it out of the way kind of thing. And the rest of it is like you challenge them directly. Does that make sense? Very aggressive, because you don't want to come across as the stereotype that they put out there, which is that everyone disagreeing with them is some kind of intellectual Jewish bug man, some kind of academy indoctrinated fuckwit who has no emotions whatsoever and exists purely to regurgitate statistics constructed by a Semitic academic environment. That's the shit they have going on in their mind, so you want to be feisty. Now, no hate here to Rosewrist and Infidel for their, everyone deals with shit how they deal with shit. Is that Nazis only or conservatives like Peterson, etc. too? No, don't do that to Peterson. No, totally different. Look, Peterson says fast shit pretty often, but totally different in terms of preferred rhetorical styles, big difference. I just fucking with my beard, man. Anyway, no hate here or whatever. I'm just saying, like, that's my preferred rhetorical methodology in this.
They obviously know the figures as well, and they also know that the population. They also know that the population are against mass immigration because they campaign on anti-immigration platforms before elections. So, best case scenario, they know that we're being demographically replaced, and they know that we don't want it, and they refuse to do anything about it. And worst case scenario, they're doing it intentionally. But I don't think it matters whether it's intentionally or they're just letting it happen. Either way, they're letting it happen. Surely that's the thing that matters.
I think, no, it absolutely does matter because, for instance, if we talk about the intent and why this is happening, then me and Malfi can provide arguments and be like, hey, maybe this isn't some big conspiracy to like get rid of white people. It just ends up being the fact that, hey, a lot of the policies that are very important in the economic development, in domestic development of these countries are going to be policies that favor migration. And that is the positives that we want to get from migration that we're trying to get at. And then as a side effect of that, demographics are going to change. And if we can agree on that that's probably what's happening and it's not some big, huge conspiracy, then it's going to be easier for us to talk about that and to talk about the effects and whether or not they're positive or negative. But if you guys have the perception that this is, oh, you know, these people hate white people and therefore they want to do what they do, then we're going to have a disconnect in that conversation that we're not going to be able to bridge that. That's why that matters.
There are plenty of politicians in the United Kingdom that stand up in Parliament and say things like, we deserve this because of the empire. They openly gloat about it and brag about it. They're clearly very, very proud of it. So to say that there's no intent there when they're incredibly anti-white all over their social media accounts, I think it's very naive.
So to be clear, when we say intent, do we mean the intent is to change the racial demographics and to minimize white people, or is the intent to argue for policies such as that of migration, and therefore that's like another effect of it? Because there's a difference there between those two things. Right. It's like the difference. Huh?
Yeah, it's Pigeon's birthday. Oh yeah, guys, I said earlier in the stream, but it's Pigeon's birthday. I'll let the NPCs kill me. Hold on, this is very important.
Oh, Pigeon.
Pigeon. Two years old. Foot. Foot. Baby. She did a little meow. Whoop. Be free. 2 years old. Yeah, 2 going on 200. Wrinkly little baby.
Between, like I talked about in the mini golf example, is it that the government wants to, you know, run indoor mini golf out of business, or is it just that there are policies that they're aimed at getting at another positive and they're having this unintended effect?
But migration isn't a net positive. You keep saying migration's a positive. It's not a net positive. And whatever positives you have, such as sort of yummy food or whatever other such nonsense. I mean, I like it when you people argue for mass immigration because your number one argument is always we get diversity, as if diversity in itself is some sort of magical shibboleth that makes our life better. It doesn't. And it seems to me that you're now already going down the route of define intent. Well, we all know what intent actually means because we've all got dictionaries, we've all got thesauruses, we can all Google things. The fact is, politicians, the mainstream media, and influential people who wield huge amounts of soft power in the West have said that this is a good thing, this is a positive, that white people being reduced to a minority is a positive. They have said that. They say that the more diversity we have, the better off we are. And more diversity equals fewer white people. So what they are...
So notice the framing here that you'll often hear with the great replacement types. So it's possible for two things to have the same outcome, but for the framing to determine whether or not they're morally good or bad, okay? So if a person was encouraging immigration into America because they legitimately wanted there to be less white people, I would think that to be a pretty, at best, I would say a pretty unconvincing, and at worst, like a pretty fucked up reason to want immigration. If it's because you value diversity and like freedom of travel, though, I actually think that's a great reason. Even if the outcomes of those two things end up being exactly the same, the reasons why do make a pretty huge difference. So by conflating, by sort of crunching together pro-diversity with anti-white, like it's been made pretty clear, any reason a person could be in favor of immigration is anti-white to them. You understand the consequence of her framing? There is no way to be pro-immigration in a way that isn't racist against white people. There's no context or circumstance in which it could be done for other reasons. In her framing.
Are essentially saying is that the fewer white people we have, the better off we will be. And that is not true.
No,
because when we look at civilizational development, the greatest civilizational development we have seen has been here in Europe. And the people that we are importing from elsewhere in the world usually come from places where there have been the least civilizational development. And if you bring people who have created nothing to places that have created everything and mix the two, there is inevitably going to be somewhat of a clash, because people who have created nothing will find it very difficult to maintain the everything that have been created by others.
Do you want to go, Matthew, or should I? Because so far, right?
So obviously, this argument is unfathomably retarded. It's essentially just like every member of a race is the type of person who would make the things that we say that race may. Like, no, it's incredibly dumb. Very, very, very silly. I mean, this is essentially just an IQ argument, except without using the term IQ. Importing low IQ people into high IQ countries, that's like the argument. Can you speed them up? They're already at 1.25 times speed.
Now we can on the first thing about the intent is, so once again, we don't have any evidence for an anti-white driver for this. All we have is a pro-diversity driver for that, which we agree that that's probably the case. So now we can move on to the other things we talked about, such as the effect.
Because pro-diversity means fewer white people.
Do you think it's possible to be pro-diversity without despising or like being bigoted against white people?
The subject.
It would be very, very hard to separate pro-diversity from anti-white, because every time something comes more diverse, the things you see taught in schools, the things you see pushed by the media, the different programs pushed by local and national government are always always anti-white in their outcome. They teach white children to hate themselves. They impose quotas, which means harder for white people to get jobs. Jobs are no longer given out on the basis of the quality of the individual, but instead on the color of the individual. So when you have diversity, it always disenfranchises white people because that is its purpose.
Yeah, so I mean, if the claim is that just having more diversity is going to lead to, you know, white people being harmed and marginalized, I guess just like, I don't know why this would be the case. I don't know like what evidence we have for that, right? I mean, I've suggested so far that insofar as we're worried about racial tensions and, you know, racial fighting, firstly, the effect sizes are very small, right? So like the biggest like recent meta-analysis on this found that like the relationship between diversity and social cohesion is statistically significant, and that diversity to some extent lowers social cohesion, but the effect sizes were such
Oh, by the way, another good argument that you can make if you choose to about the whole bullshit, like this is a smart white country, so when you bring dumb brown people in, it ruins it. Then why is it that like America is one of the most diverse countries on Earth, and we're also like the most insanely powerful, influential, like Giga Chad country ever, basically? Like, it's just funny to say that because like, dude, the low IQ of the foreigners can't keep up with us. But like, meanwhile, America and Western Europe are the juggernauts of the world. Finally, the most ethnically homogenous country of the whole the West is probably Japan, and they're having huge issues with their economy because they're so xenophobic. Yeah, the Roman Empire is super multicultural as well. It's just dumb, you know. Like, honest to God, look around the world. The countries that are the least multicultural are usually the countries that aren't multicultural because nobody wants to go there. That's the reason why. Countries that produce and are good and rock tend to be multicultural, either because of the diversity of cultures within their borders to begin with, or because they attract a lot of immigration. And that usually leads into a kind of like carry-away effect where that country gets even more pog. And the funny thing is that there are like two opposite perspectives here that Nazis will both bring up, because Nazis will also pretend to care about non-white people and say that by allowing for immigration, we're encouraging brain drain from their countries, you know, as the most like achieved academics and doctors and what have you go from other countries to America. But you can't believe both of those things simultaneously, that we're contributing to brain drain in other countries. Whoops. And also that other countries aren't sending their best. Yeah, we get a lot of high skill labor from non-white countries, you know? Very silly. No, America is not the most diverse country. But again, XM1, a lot of it has to do with where you distinguish like ethnic and cultural boundaries, and also whether you're looking at chosen diversity or just innate diversity within the borders. Is the brain drain thing a legit argument, though? To an extent, but it's also not one that you're going to fix by closing off immigration. In fact, remittances, which is money sent to home countries by immigrants, are actually a really big source of wealth in poorer countries that send their smartest people over to like America or Europe or whatever. So it wouldn't improve things over there. If you want to make those countries better, you have to invest in them, make things better. What is the most racially diverse country? I don't know. Maybe I've heard it's Brazil? Maybe.
small, such that like diversity could account for like 0.66% of the variation in social cohesion that was observed. So like the effect is like not that big. You're making a very apocalyptic story out of something that's in reality very minor. And then like we know that there are things that can alleviate the impact of diversity on social cohesion. And I've listed what some of those things are, and you haven't really spoken to that at all. You've just kind of feigned incredulity about it.
No, I haven't. I've said the truth about it. What you're saying is, to alleviate the problems of multiculturalism, we need more multiculturalism. And the way you guys talk is, frankly, a complete joke. We have presented here that there have been hundreds of thousands of white girls who have been groomed, sexually abused, raped, but it's brushed under the carpet by people who value diversity. Because to people like you, your diversity...
So there have been hundreds of thousands of British girls who have been groomed and raped. It's just overwhelmingly being done by British men. You know, it's not wrong. It's just, you know, far-right people only pretend to care about rape when it's being done by brown people, you know? Like, they will literally pivot on heel from defending Matt Gaetz or whatever to like, screeching about Muslim rape gangs or some insane bullshit like that. Yeah, really, the main issue, like, the only reason they care about that is because they think brown or black people are deflowering white women that otherwise they would want to fuck, you know? That's basically it. Let me through. If I recall correctly, most of the victims were brown. Anytime people bitch and moan about, like, an epidemic of crime from an immigrant group, if you look at the victims, it's overwhelmingly, like, their own immigrant group. Because that's always how this shit tends to go. And they overstate those crimes anyway.
Diversity project is more important than white girls, white children living in a world which is rape-free, because these girls have gone through hell, but you're happy for that as long as you get your lambooner, or you can say the world is more diverse, or you can sit on YouTube, because you're obviously allowed on YouTube because you think all this is fantastic, so obviously you're not going to lose your channel, and you're going to make some money off that. So that's why you support this. It's absolutely pitiful, and it's morally reprehensible. If white people in their thousands were doing this to non-white girls, you guys would be going mad about it. But because it's white girls who are the victims, it doesn't bother you.
So we don't support. Oh, sorry. Do you think that we don't support steps to prevent refugees from raping white women?
The best step is not to let them in.
That's bad framing.
Sure, we could eliminate any problem by just like stopping letting all people in and then stopping.
Really bad framing for Mouthy Infidel right there. There's no reason to buy into the premise that you would need to specifically prevent migrants from raping white girls or whatever. You can just say, like, yeah, we're totally against, like, we're totally in favor of, like, programs to prevent rape or whatever, you know? Given the fact that, like, the majority of rapes in Britain are done by white men, then, like, yeah, we teach comprehensive sex ed in class or some shit like that. Yeah, that's a really bad framing. There's no reason to go for that. I can't pause or unpause the video when it's dead. It's
everyone from like having kids, right? Like, I mean, if like say, like take any, like I take it that you're pro increasing like birth rates, right? And I am too, through like you know, allowing like welfare policies and so on that make it easier for people to have kids, right? Some of those kids who are going to be born as a result of those policies are going to end up raping women, right? But generally, we take it that we have to.
Whoa. I've heard this argument before. So what you're saying is, because white men rape some white women in very, very low numbers, we should import very men from elsewhere in the world who rape white women in greater numbers.
Let's talk about this grooming gang thing, okay? Because this is something you bring up a lot about the Muslim grooming gangs, right? So the best piece of evidence we have right now for the demographic breakdown of these perpetrators is the Home Office report on the breakdown of what these consisted of and who were the main perpetrators in those grooming gangs. What do you mean we don't have the Home Office report? I have it on the second monitor right here.
They didn't release the figures properly, but we do actually have a study back. Have you seen the Quillian one? That's now been deleted.
You don't have the Home Office report.
What do you mean we don't have it? I'm sitting on a 59-page report right now. Group-based child sexual exploitation characteristics for offenders.
The Home Office report on the grooming gangs was sealed by the government and not released because they said it was not in the public interest to know the truth. Grooming gang review kept secret.
I think that's a lie. I haven't looked into it, though.
Releasing findings are not in the public interest. What you're about
So what am I looking at? What 59-page report am I looking at right now?
You're looking at the one in relation to Operation U-Tree, which was historic incidences of sexual abuse within the establishment.
It was sealed and released?
Report on the Pakistan...
Wait, sorry, Operation what? Wait, what's the second word there?
U-Tree.
What's the first letter on that? Is it U? Is that the first letter of U-Tree?
Y-E-W.
Y-E-W. Okay, so Operation U-Tree doesn't show up a single time in this report. Just Control F, Operation U-Tree, 0 results. So that's not what it's about. So you're talking about something else.
That report is nothing to do with it. I'm posting this in the
So what am I looking at then? I'm curious.
See this and post it in the groups. The grooming gang review was kept secret as Home Office claims releasing findings is not in the public interest.
So Operation U-Tree doesn't appear a single time in this report that I'm looking at right now. Right now I'm looking at a report called Group-Based Child Sexual Exploitation, Characteristics for Offending. And what you said it was is not true at all whatsoever. So in this...
I can't wait. At some point in this debate, I would bet some amount of money that one of these guys is going to say that they're Jewish. I've got a feeling that might happen.
I wonder why he wasn't able to make it for longer on YouTube. Yeah, there we go. This is one of the reasons why we're always going to win, by the way. It's because Nazis are fucking brain damaged. They're legitimately retarded. They can't keep it together. They're incapable of it. They have no ability to. I'm impressed he lasted this long, you know? This is why fascist governments fall apart. It's a fundamental... This is why I say fascism is a mental illness, okay? It's too big of a problem for them for it to be a coincidence. They're just too stupid, you know? I refuse to believe it's like, oh, dude, fascism isn't a mental illness. It's just that all of them are, like, cripplingly brain damaged, you know? No.
Okay, so I can read what one of the parts of the executive summary here. So, a number of high-profile cases, including the offending in Rotterdam, investigated by Professor Alexis J. and Rockdale Group, convicted as a result of Operation Span, the convictions in Telford, have mainly involved men of Pakistani ethnicity. Beyond specific high-profile cases, the academic literature highlights significant limitations to what can be said about the links between ethnicity in this form of offending. Researchers found that group-based CSE offenders are most commonly white. So, I don't know what to tell you. You seem to be making this up. I'm seeing a report right now. You said it was something else, but...
on the grooming gangs,
I think that is the report.
Was sealed by the government.
Then what am I looking at? I need to understand what I'm looking at.
You're not looking at the government report.
So what am I looking at?
You can go... I don't know what you're looking at, because I'm not looking at your screen.
I'll read out the text of this again.
The Home Office report was sealed because it was so explosive and it exposed the level of abuse that white girls were going through at the hands of people of migrant descent. So the government had to...
Hold on, let me just see. Written grooming migrant report released. Yeah, it was released in mid-December 2020, it seems. Much anticipated Home Office report. This was released a year and a half ago. Wait, is Mark Collett seriously this behind on his talking points? It was released a year and a half ago. Okay. Yeah, basically, the main meme with the grooming gangs thing is the term grooming gangs is not a legal term. It's not like a specific legal designation. It's a term created by the media that was hyper-refined by far-right groups to exclusively refer to, like, Muslim immigrants. If you take a look at child sexual abuse or rapes generally, like, this is not like an East Asian problem. Isn't that what they say in England? It's like East Asian? That's like the group? No, not East Asian. South Asian? There's some term. In America, we don't use it, but in Britain, it refers to people. Do they just say Asian? It's something like that. They just say Asian? Yeah, it's not a designation we use here in America. But anyway, like, it's like a statistically perfectly in line with their population size. But like, basically, it's like the far right was like, so Muslims commit majority of rapes? No. Okay, well, do they commit the majority of rapes here in Rotherham? No. Okay, well, do they commit the majority of rapes here in Rotherham if we exclusively include them as, like, if we only look at group crimes? No. What if we only look at group crimes done in Rotherham that aren't internet-based? No. Okay, well, what if we do that between this particular time frame? Okay, well, during this particular time frame, for this type of behavior, in this type of city, in this type of... Then yes, in this particular way, yes, it's majority Muslims. Woo! And then they ran with that for 5 years, you know. It's basically like that, you know.
to seal it to stop public unrest. Laura, you've got a very interesting statistic from an actual Muslim.
So once again, I don't know what I can. So this is a new strategy. I'm not aware of people saying that the report I'm looking at doesn't exist, but who knows?
I think the one that you might be looking at, Rosary, is the one where they changed the classification of the perpetrators that they were looking at, so that they could open it up to, different styles of abuse as well. But there was a study done by Quilliam a number of years ago, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which had a good sample size.
That's interesting. I think the report you're looking at is the one where they opened up to different styles of abuse, aka the one where they actually looked at all rapes and sexual assaults and not just the hyper-specific media-defined grooming gang term. Basically, she's saying your study is invalid because it looks at sexual crimes as a whole rather than the hyper-specific, deliberately cultivated terminology that we've used to hyper-fixate on Muslim grooming gangs.
66% of perpetrators were, I think it was either Pakistani or Pakistani Muslim. That's actually been removed from their website now. There was a report that tried to debunk it, but if you guys want to go into that, I can also debunk that report, but if you haven't seen it, I suppose it doesn't matter. But I think that's the most accurate report that we have, which said that it was around 86%, so that's a huge overrepresentation. At the last census, Muslims were around 5% of the population, and Pakistanis were around 2% of the population.
Yeah, I don't know what this Killiam study is. The fact that you already said that people have a lot of serious disagreements on it makes me a bit worried. I think that trusting the Home Office, which seems to be probably the most comprehensive data set on this, is going to be a lot more reliable than what you're referencing.
A lot of people haven't had disagreements with it. There was one study that tried to debunk it and failed.
So when I Google it, I'm getting a bunch of things specifically about how this thing is misleading. That's the first thing when I Google Killiam study grooming. I'm getting things about it being misleading. But yeah.
Why are you not listening to the words? The Home Office report on the grooming scandal that was commissioned was never released because the government said it wasn't in the public interest.
I don't know what I'm looking at here.
It was released.
I know what you're looking at.
So I can read out the title for the fourth time if you want me to.
You're waving your hand around. Your limp wrist is flapping in the air. The soy is spilling out from your orifices. You don't know what
trying
you're
to be Paul
about,
Joseph Watson.
And what you're trying to do is weaselly explain your way out of the fact that hundreds of thousands of white girls were sexually abused by men of migrant descent. But you don't care because that stands in the way of your diversity project.
So once again,
I'll just say, this isn't an issue I've looked into.
Mal the Infidel, here's a challenge. Make it through a sentence without saying
Okay. So the point I was just going to make is that I haven't looked into this issue, but even granting the premise,
kind of sounds a bit like there. Are we letting you off on that?
We have two brand new debate strategies. You're not allowed to say and you denying the existence of a report that I'm literally looking at my monitor. These are high level tactics I'm not aware of. But go on, Matthew.
Yeah, so even if I grant the premise that we have this big problem,
I would have cried if someone said that to me. This is exactly why I say, in conversations like this aren't worthy of 2v2s. They're not worthy of moderators. Not worthy of anything. For people like this, my only prevailing attitude is oh, you want to come on stream here, sure. And then I just spend 4 hours asking them about disabilities and their family history, and how they can possibly support eugenics when their children would be mentally subnormal. That's the there's no point. First of all, he's British. Second of all, look at this conversation. Can you try not to say Can your wrists are looking rather soy right now. Well, he's saying the debate the paper they're looking at doesn't exist. It's dude was clearly bullied in high school. Black dude clearly fucked his crush. He's not making it back in adulthood. You got a license for that bad study I wasn't ready to respond to. Oh, imagine being British and trying to bully someone. Fuck me. Can you imagine? God. Imagine having that little self-awareness. No, that's what I said, Soaked on Left. Soaked on Left, did you listen to me? I literally said that. You have to provide the stats in a sort of nonchalant way. So they don't care about the stats. You just have to frame it properly. Are these Nazis scared of you? No, there are plenty of fucking Nazi debates where I don't care to be. This Britney bitch, the one in the top left, is one of those I'm a liberal if you ignore the fact that all I do and say is Nazi shit types, and I really do think she's not mentally well. Soaked on Left, I can't imagine you going super aggro, to match a Nazi's energy. But yeah, I'm sure there are plenty who would like to elevate themselves. The issue is that when you're a moron and you are trying to attract the attention of morons, any attention you get whatsoever is a big boost for you, you know? Like, somebody could come on and fail to make any point. Like, so far, Mark Cullett hasn't made any fucking point, and he's not been able to back any of his positions. But that's fine. Like, that doesn't matter for his audience, right? So, I only accept debates if I think they'd be fun, and if I care to, and if I think they're, like, worth my time, you know? But after, like, the 700th Nazi smackdown, like, it's pretty obvious they just like the red marks in their face.
Problem with rape gangs, right? If that's true, right, I'd have to look into it more. This is just not an area of research. If it's true that this is like a big problem, and the scale is such that it warrants restricting the amount of refugees from this specific area that Britain is allowing in, then that's fine.
Specific area,
right?
as in the West.
I don't know what you're talking about. You said it's Pakistani immigrants specifically, right? That was your claim.
I was just being facetious. I was saying the place where we should stop immigrants coming into is the West, as in, don't let them in, and we don't have the problem.
But if these grooming, I take it that these grooming gangs are coming from a specific demographic, namely men, probably a specific age group, probably, you know, not too young, not too old. I doubt like 70-year-olds are engaging in this, and from a specific country, that being Pakistanis, right? And so if this is a big problem, then fine, that might warrant restricting immigration from that specific demographic. But that's a long way from justifying like forming an ethno-state, right?
What? I can't fathom why this is the... I have no idea why this is the rhetorical approach you're taking here. It's kind of beyond me, to be honest with you. I have no idea why you'd accept these premises. Stop. Yeah, that's really weird. I understand. I can sympathize with the intention. The intention being like, well, I can indicate that their behavior is irrational by pointing out they could achieve their same ends with a much lower level of discrimination. So why go for the higher level? But that's like just not how you talk with people like this, you know? Because all the logic is subservient to them, to their emotional, like they don't care. Like all you're really doing is ceding ground. They keep killing you. Yeah, well, like I said, Dark Souls 2 has been particularly difficult so level 1 because it really fucks with the roll iframes.
No, it's usually all ages, and the problem is that it's not. They don't seem to stand up against it. The families, they cover it up. I mean, lots of people work in takeaways or as taxi drivers and that kind of thing, and it happens under the noses of other people in their community, and it's never brought forward by their families. But it does happen to people of all ages. But can I just say, the first topic of the debate was supposed to be whether the Great Replacement is real. Can I just clarify? Do you two admit that we are becoming minorities?
So once again, there's nothing to admit here. There's no concession here. None of us are arguing with the fact that demographic change is happening. That's not admission, it's not concession, that's nothing. That's just a statement about a descriptor. Yeah, I mean, we both acknowledge it's in our opening, but you weren't here, so I don't blame you.
I can't turn down the speed subpar. I don't want to have to listen to this more.
So when you said that the Killiam study had like a good sample size, is it true that the Killiam report had 264 cases over 12 years? And did you call that a good sample size?
I don't know the exact number, but it was a representative sample.
How do you know? So 264 over 12 years. Do you think does that sound representative to you? As compared to the thousands of things gone over by the Home Office report? What do you think is better, thousands or 264 over 12 years?
Do you think there are? It's happening in pretty much every city.
So you think that there's only been 264 instances of grooming over 12 years? Is that what you're telling me right now? Oh, hey, Mark, don't save her, Mark. Don't save her, Mark. Come on, let me ask Laura some questions. Okay, sure, that's fine, that's fine. Bail her out.
Have a look at what you see. Use your eyes. Observable reality. I could start reading the names of those convicted. The fact is, already said, and you can Google this as well, the Home Office report on this issue was sealed. What he's saying is not actually the Home Office report on this because it's been sealed, but he's desperately trying to defend mass immigration.
Yeah, wait, so really quickly,
study didn't set out to prove that it was a Pakistani Muslim problem. They didn't. I mean, I think it's a Pakistani guy that ran it, actually. They looked at a representative sample, and then they said, these are the results.
So to be clear, do you think that there's only been 264 instances of convicted grooming offenders over 12 years? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't have the report in front of me, so
because when I said that there were only 264 instances over 12 years, you were like, well, how many groomings do you think that there are? So I'm asking you, do you think that this is the amount of groomings that there are?
No, I don't think that's the amount of groomings that there are. But I don't know if that's how many is in the study because I don't have the study in front of me. If you have the study...
But you felt confident enough to say that there was a lot of representative sampling, but you don't even know what the sampling looked like whatsoever. Am I clear on that?
I remember when I read it that it was a representative sample.
Okay.
Do you have the study in front of you? Post it in the chat on StreamYard.
The Killiam study. I'm looking at a review of it right now where it states specifically what the sample size looked like. So I'm reading...
Is it the study itself? Post it in the chat on StreamYard, please.
I can pull up the study itself. What I'm currently reading from is a website from Policy Insight that is titled "When Bad Evidence is Worse Than No Evidence: Killiam's Grooming Gangs Report and Its Legacy." And I'm under the subtext of bad science, and it says that the Killiam Report sample of just 264 convicted offenders over 12 years is clearly very partial. That's what I'm reading about. I can try to find the PDF of the Killiam Report, but I'd be very surprised if they're just straight up lying about the sample size here. It seems to be a very odd thing to lie about, but I can check that for you. But I doubt I'm being correct.
In the chat, but what I did say is that is the best study that we have, and it isn't.
Yeah, I know, Shu. Apparently, my hair is defaulting to a middle part. Like I'm some kind of TikToker. I brush it to the side every morning after my shower, and then I put on a beanie to try to put my hair in that position. But yeah, it's not intentional. I need a haircut. Yeah. No, Shu, I totally get. Well, Noah Samson looks like an archetypical TikToker, so you know it definitely tracks. Can we not? Oh my god. Oh my god. Damn, this area sucks. Alright. Oh, whoops. Oh.
Every single grooming instance within the United Kingdom, but it's the best one and the only one to my knowledge that we have. Because as Mark says, the Home Office one hasn't been released.
So what is the report? Group-based child sexual exploitation, characteristics of offending from December 2020 from the Home Office. What is this report then? What am I looking at?
Oh, by the way, it's worth mentioning that I'm looking at that link right now. It came out in December of 2020. The article that Mark linked was from like February of 2020. So it's very likely that they originally weren't intending to publish it and then they did, right? That seems like the most likely scenario given the fact that you're looking at the report. Why isn't that what's happened? Then what report are we looking at, Mark?
Why don't you post the report?
His area brain can't understand the timelines. It's too difficult. Oh man.
I clearly understand timelines. The Home Office report into the grooming scandal has been sealed. These things are sealed.
I saw Endgame.
Actually, a century. And the reason they're sealed for that length of time is to ensure that those who were part and parcel of any of this are not alive when they're unsealed. And the reason it was sealed is quite clearly, well, there's multiple reasons. Firstly, it will be overwhelmingly migrants who carried out these crimes. Secondly, the police will have been complicit in them. Thirdly, the girls will overwhelmingly have been white. Fourth, the local councils, MPs, and other people involved in politics will also have been aware of this. Fifth, social services will have known about this. We already know social services have been involved in this. And
what does being involved mean?
There will have been massive community.
Wait, what is it? What does this mean? Being involved? Police are complicit? What the fuck does that? What does that mean? Social. He's implying that it means like a cover up, like they're complicit in hiding. I don't even know. I don't have conspiracy brain. He's claiming us all the info from the sealed report. Well, the report was unsealed. Maybe he thinks he has the upper edge on everyone because he has the unsealed report, because someone emailed him like a year and a half ago and was like, hey, I am a government agent and I got you this secret report, and it was released that day, but he's just gone on thinking he's the only one with that info the whole time.
Involvement from the wider Muslim community. And because of all of these reasons, the official report has been sealed and it hasn't been...
All right, by the way, this is the end of this debate, right? Because I just found a petition on change.org or petition.parliament.uk. Originally, apparently, they didn't release the report. Then there was a massive petition called Release the Home Office's Grooming Gang Review in Full. And then it was debated in Parliament. And then the government responded to the petition saying that the government was going to publish a paper. This was posted in May 2020, saying that the government, in fact, was going to publish a paper releasing the findings of the review. And then that paper was published in December of 2020. Yeah. So you're just wrong.
The full report hasn't been published.
Wait, Mark, I want you to do a very simple thing. I want you to open a Google window right now. Tell me when you've done that.
Mark,
open a Google window. I'm going to make you do a simple... I'm showing you how to get that information because you seem to be struggling with that a lot. So
I know the report has not been...
Mark, it seems unable to Google. For anyone at home in the audience, all you need to do is open a tab of Google, search Home Office Report Grooming Gangs, and the first result
That's literally what I typed in.
Group-based child sexual exploitation characteristics of offending. And you will find the report that we're talking about here. This isn't sealed. This is right there with one Google search that's incapable of doing.
A report that is not about the grooming gangs. The grooming gang report was never fully released. It is still sealed. You can say whatever you want, but those are the facts. Okay. And the fact is that you sat there with such a smug, stupid look on your face because ultimately you don't care that these girls were raped. You don't care about the negative consequences for white people of mass immigration. All you care about...
Dude, see what he does right there? It's like, hey, I'm literally looking at the report. And he's like, no, you're not. You're smirking right now because you're because you don't care about those white girls. The funny thing is, okay, this is a little bit spicy here, okay? The funny thing is that if you look at like Nazi propaganda or whatever, they try to frame Jews as like these incredibly socially intelligent, emotionally manipulative people. And it's like I don't, maybe he hates them because he can't do what he thinks they do, okay? Because it's so fucking obvious. It's the white girls, like, it's no engagement with what's being said. Yeah, just massive projection, you know? Fuck. Yeah, exactly. He couldn't rework the talking point after the report was released, so he's just continuing on with it anyway. The report's right there in front of his face. It's right there. Googleable. You can Google it if you want. Right there, December 2020. But he can't adjust his talking point because like reality never mattered. So he has to, you pointing out that I'm wrong is only further evidence that you want white girls raped. Okay.
About is that the Multicultural Diversity Project carries on, and you can sit there crowing about it, making money off it,
making money off like
about it, because that is your political slant. And I can tell you this now: I'm sure that both of you believe in feminism. You believe in all manner of left-leaning feminist garbage. But when it comes to actual real women's rights, i.e., the right not to be raped by gangs of migrants, you people are awfully silent.
But hold on, we're actually in favor of women not to be raped by anybody, okay? Not just gangs of migrants. I don't know why you threw that in there. I don't know what your take on this is, but I just thought that I would point that out. Go on.
Yeah, are you in favor of rape from non-gangs of migrants?
It's amazing, right? Like I've been looking at this for like 5 minutes. Somehow, like already I know more than like you have, and this was like your main point, right? So firstly, the article that you linked, right? The article that you linked said that the reason that they weren't going to release the full report is because there was information that was operationally sensitive to the police, i.e. if it went public, it would hinder the police's ability to do their job. But then later on in the year, the government released a report releasing all of the full findings of that report that weren't operationally sensitive, and that's the report that Rose Risk was looking at, right? So the report that Rose Risk is looking at contains all of the relevant information on the data regarding Muslim rape gangs. It just excluded some parts of the report that were operationally sensitive and that needed to be kept private in order for the police to do their job, right?
Is the report that you're looking at the one with 2,300 offenders? Because if it is, that report's also inaccurate. First of all, there's no basic information in the report for, I think it's 1,200 people. Of the other 1,100 people, 30% of them, I think it is, don't have their ethnicity recorded. And then of the ones that they actually do have an ethnicity for, I think it's something like 30% of them are white. Now, that's an underrepresentation anyway,
is that an English accent? That's not English, right?
So if you're looking at the government report, which me and Mark think you're looking at, that's inaccurate anyway.
Wait, sorry, so which one do you think we're looking at? Which one do you think we're looking at? Can you say that again?
The one where it's 2,300 offenders in total.
2,300 doesn't appear a single time in this PDF, so it doesn't appear like this is the one we're talking about. But
the one that they released instead of the one that they were supposed to release, there was so much missing information from it. The majority of people didn't have their ethnicity recorded, and then when it came to white people anyway, they were very clever in the media, and they said the majority of people are white. Well, it's a white majority country.
So 23,000 doesn't appear a single time in any capacity in this report we're looking at. I think you're talking about something different, but we seem to be stuck on this grooming thing on the reports. Man. I mean, I would say that we're correct because you guys have failed to demonstrate this, and when we look at evidence, everything you seem to say seems to not be true. So moving away from the grooming gang specifically, we can
also,
talk about something.
Can I mention one more thing, right? Because so in addition to the fact that the report you were looking at has all the relevant information and just excluded certain things that were operationally sensitive.
Yeah, certain things like the actual ethnicity of the vast majority of defendants, and the fact that the police were complicit in it. You know, having a whitewashed, watered down version of a report released,
it's in the report.
Released does not constitute releasing the full report. Now that's obvious.
So is the rest of this debate just going to be like Mouthy Infidel and Rose Risk being like, the data's right here. It's literally right here. He's like, no, it's not. No, it's you Jew. No, it's not. Is that the whole rest of it? Like they could just look at it together, but he obviously won't look at it because you can tell from the way this guy's speaking that he's terrified right now. He knows he fucked up. He didn't know that the report got released. And he doesn't know. He doesn't know how to adjust his talking points. So he's just like, these guys, man. These guys are wacky. Wacky. Why won't you get a bunch of little Brits with silly accents? I'm sorry. It's a low point for the channel.
That is obvious. And also,
are you like listening
if
to what
you
I'm
go
saying?
through the names of the people, which
You're not
you
tracking.
can, who have been convicted, and you look at their mugshots, observable reality tells you they are not indigenous Brits. And that's the other thing that you people always fail to do.
Let him do his
fail
ramble
to
about
look at
anecdotes, Malky, and then we'll switch to something else afterwards.
reality.
All right.
Because
I was going to try and get another point out, but you just can't.
No, it seems very difficult. We'll just move on from Grooming gangs after this.
Your worldview. It's as simple as that.
Got a question for you, you feminazi Jewish soy liberal limp wrist cuckolds. Why is it, if Muslim grooming gangs aren't a problem, then why is it when I Google Muslim grooming gangs, the people in the photos always look Muslims? Oh? Oi? Curious, isn't it? I can't. You made his point better than him. Be careful. Oh yeah, fuck. You're right. I'm still making his arguments right now. Oh, I can't laugh too hard or I'll start coughing again.
All right, cool. Matthew, what's the next thing?
Do you want to say? Good.
Let me through.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we can move on from this. I don't know what we want the next point to be. This whole thing started from you pivoting from the point about social cohesion to start bringing up like the grooming gangs, right?
What are you talking pivoting? Social cohesion. When you have white girls en masse being raped by migrants.
So
there is no
don't bring that up.
social
We've gone over that, and you
cohesion.
don't seem to be able to provide
White
evidence for that. That's
victim
satisfactory. So we'll
class
move on to something
when they
else.
become a minority in towns like Rotherham and Telford. And the government have covered this up because multiculturalism, state-enforced multiculturalism, is the holy shibboleth of our society. So it can never be criticised. So when you're talking about community cohesion, I'm saying there is no cohesion.
Yeah, this is actually unbelievable. It's story time. It's too early for this. Okay, so we can talk about, so there are issues that exist with enclaves to some extent that does arise from migration. We agree that this is something that can happen.
Oh, since I'm giving rhetorical advice or whatever, I think Roserish just did a good job there. If a person's just rambling and not engaging, you can just call it rambling. You can like talk over them, like not to like scream them down or whatever, because that will only make them shout louder, but just be like, okay, all right, let me know when you're done. Let me know when you're done. Like hand wavy, because they're just rambling to like filibuster at that point. Like contempt, like obvious verbally expressed contempt is good in situations like this, I think. Stop! Sorry. The expression of contempt is rhetorically useful, you know, making fun of them. And don't be afraid. Yeah, be condescending. Don't be afraid to repeat questions or interrupt or whatever, you know? Don't be afraid of doing that. It's very important in debates like this, where truth does not matter to them, to make them feel bad, you know? Like, just make them feel bad.
That's something that does exist to some extent. So the question should then be, okay, because you guys don't seem to want to fight us on the things about, for example, economic benefits and stuff like that. So how do we minimize these types of, there are no economic benefits of migration? Did you just say that?
Economic benefits. There are no economic benefits unless you take raw rises in GDP, not GDP per capita, but raw rises in GDP as the benefit. There is no benefit. What people end up doing in
Wages
countries
go up
that grow their
immigration.
population to cause rising GDP is you have overcrowding, destruction of the countryside, you have falling wages, falling quality of life, but
wages
people
go
who
up.
put raw GDP on a pedestal, they are fools. And that is exactly what Western governments have done. When you look at the effect of migrant workers on the West, it is always bad for people of European descent. And you see this in the UK. P&O Ferries have just sacked all of their British workers and replaced them with foreign workers because they can pay foreign workers cheaper wages. This comes out time and time again, and simple supply and demand tells you that if you keep increasing the supply of workers, the wages for those workers will fall. It's simple.
You just don't know how supply and demand works, okay? Like, sure, when more workers come in, that increases the supply of workers. You know what else it does? Increases the demand for products, which increases the demand for workers, which increases wages. Right? This is why the impact of this is like supply and demand 101, right? This is why the impact of immigration on wages is generally a wash, right?
Quality of life in the West is not going up. Quality of life is getting worse.
So, which for factors have nothing to do with immigration. If the idea that like having more people in the country drives wages down is true, wouldn't that mean that countries with small populations would always have the highest wages? Like think for a second. Like really think for a second. Like, oh, then shouldn't America with its 300 million people have much lower wages on average than Estonia with its around 1 million people? Oh, but reality It's not like that. Well, why is that? Well, obviously because the more people there are in a country, the greater a demand there is for every product and service that would create a job. Very straightforward stuff, but you know, Nazi economic skill not so good. Really not so good. German economy was not doing too great under World War II. Sorry for shouting. It's late.
For numerous reasons, and one of those reasons, or a major driving factor in the worsening quality of life, is mass immigration for multiple reasons.
That doesn't speak to anything that I just said. I don't know why you saw fit to just start rambling about nothing after I.
I'm not rambling about nothing. I'm saying it pushes down wages. I've just given you a real-world example that's happened in the last month of basically British workers losing their jobs for lower-paid migrant workers. And I've stated
then
that
pay those
not
workers
everything is about growth in raw GDP. There is also quality of life.
So generally speaking, when we're trying to analyze the impact of immigration on wages, we don't point to specific anecdotes and say, hey, look, these are wages that had their, or these are...
No, we don't give actual examples of white people losing their jobs to migrants, because that would defeat your point.
Well, no, it doesn't defeat my point. That's the problem, right? That's why I'm saying you shouldn't bring it up, right? You should try and bring up something that actually would defeat my point so that we could have a more fruitful discussion, right? Because when we're trying to analyze the impact in general of immigration on wages, we don't, it's not sufficient to just say, hey, here's a group of people who had their wages docked by immigration, right? Because there could be another group of white people who had their wages increased by immigration.
Something that I really like doing, by the way, is really layer on the condescension, you know? Like, hey, you're white. You're supposed to be a champion of the white race, right? Then why is it that you are seemingly genetically incapable of grasping even the simplest precepts of any kind of sociological analysis? This is called anecdotal evidence, you fucking moron. Like, you can't... It's like, did you hear this one story of this one time a migrant worker got a... Great, here's a published data, like study over 20 years that shows that immigration leads to net average higher wages. Okay, we're done. Like, it's just wasting time. It is funny, you know, because the Nazis talk about how the West is great. Guys, you realize that before the Enlightenment, the West was not in any way, like, globally enviable, right? Like, like back like 400 or 500 years ago, like the whole world was like basically a feudalist shit pit. With variants, I admit. But the stuff that made the West great in every way they claim it did was because of ideologies they outwardly oppose, you know? Like what, they're supposed to be pro-enlightenment? Enlightenment, the brotherhood, fraternity, equality? Yeah, I'm sure, yeah, some Nazis are great champions of the Enlightenment. I'm sure, oh god, what was that French dude who wrote 1 billion fucking things, plays and everything? Voltaire. Yeah, I'm sure, yeah, Voltaire, thank you. I'm sure they would have gotten along great with Voltaire. Yeah, I'm sure they would have had a phenomenal correspondence. Well, it began mostly because of colonialism soaked in left, but when colonialism like distinguished the West, I think in an economic, did I just die? Fuck. In an economic sense, you know, we became more militarily and economically powerful. But in terms of like, because they talk about cultural supremacy, right? Like, I don't like culturally, I don't think there was a tremendous distinction. Obviously, there are huge differences, but in terms of what we would now in the modern world consider to be like a more, well, enlightened society, that would have been ideological stuff. They would have vehemently opposed. Yeah.
This is why when we're doing statistical studies on the impact of immigration on wages, we want to look at averages. We want to look at the aggregate impact. Now we can disaggregate this based on like different income levels if we want to, right? But even that, it requires more than just like pointing to anecdotes and then extrapolating from that statistical generalities, right? Economics is just a little bit more complicated than that.
Well, thank you for that word salad, but it still doesn't change the fact
salad.
that we see time and again
so dumb.
Western workers, people in the West, France, Germany, the UK, being replaced by migrant workers who are willing to work for lower wages. This has happened multiple times. There was a huge scandal a few years ago during the middle of COVID where fruit pickers on farm for farm work were being flown in from all over Europe, and British workers weren't being employed. These scandals happen time and time again, and it has led to huge
they said that no white people had applied for the job, so they had to outsource it to other countries, and then it was leaked. I think it was 35,000, or was it 3,500 British people had applied for the jobs and they'd all been declined.
Yeah, this is all just kind of confusing to me because I think I gave like a very clear explanation of why pointing to anecdotes isn't sufficient when we're trying to analyze general economic impacts of certain policies. And then rather than actually addressing any of that, you just gave me like another anecdote, right? I mean, do you just like rely on your audience being too stupid to understand what I said so that you can just not address it and like pretend that?
Now, what we rely on is real world examples that back up what we're saying. What we don't rely on is the George Soros funded report that tells everybody on your side of the political fence what they want to hear and tells them that they should be happy about this process whilst they're all living in shoeboxes, eating the bug.
So remember what I said earlier about how you don't want to talk in a way that leans you into the stereotype of a urban Jewish bugman? Like, he literally just did the thing. Like, these people are so predictable that I could, like, before seeing the debate, I can go like, okay, well, here's what they're going to try to do and blah, blah. Yeah, it always turns back into like the anti-Semitic schizo posting. Yeah, I think I think like more derision is beneficial here to a large extent, you know, like just making fun of them. I know it sounds kind of crude, but I mean, if I don't think opponents like this are really deserving of like a super detailed and fastidious what are the Nazis going to do when Soros dies? Well, Nazis don't believe Jews can die. They believe that, like a serpent, the Soros body will simply consume itself in an Ouroboros before being reborn. Something. I'm sure they believe something like that. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to make a jab. Yeah, it's good to jab. Is that what serpents do? Yeah, probably.
But let's talk about that perfect housing. You brought that up before. I'm very happy you brought that up. Because I looked up housing. So I looked up housing because when you mentioned it before, you're wrong about housing.
Stamped government multicultural project reports that are funded by people like Soros, that are funded by numerous institutes.
You realize you can read the methodologies of reports, right?
No, do you think he can read them? He doesn't understand timelines. He would not be able to read them. Okay, don't even give him that idea. Okay, so you talked about housing before, and I decided to look that up after you mentioned it. Okay, so I'm citing right now from a study titled Immigration and House Prices in the UK, published in the Economic Journal of Oxford in 2015. I'm going to read a selection from the conclusion of that paper. There's a growing body of literature looking at the effect of immigration on house prices in different countries. This is an important dimension of the economic effects of immigration, given the large weight that housing consumption has on the household budget. This article contributes to the immigration literature by estimating the effect of immigration on house prices in the UK and highlighting the channels through which this effect takes place. Using data on immigration and house prices for 170 local authorities in England and Wales, I find that immigration has a negative effect on house prices. An increase in immigrant population equal to 1% of the total local population reduces house prices by 1.7%.
They don't understand any of this.
You're wrong in that. I bet if I look into the other things as well, you're going to be wrong in that as well. But we'll see.
House prices in the UK are going through the roof.
But it sure as fuck is not because of migration, very clearly.
On the housing ladder.
But it's not because...
I don't know what any of them fancy wordy words you just used was, but look at your eyes. Housing prices have gone up. So that must be because of immigrant. Yeah, no, he can't understand stuff like this. At points like this, I like to turn to their audience and just talk directly to their audience. Like, basically the implication being like, you're legitimately not intelligent enough to have this conversation. Maybe there's a few people in your audience who can be saved. And basically just go like, look, these people are morons and grifters and schizophrenics who want to take real problems that you face day to day and convince you that it's because you're the victim in some grand holy war that they're convinced will undo the fact that they got bullied in high school, which it won't, you know. Like, if you care about like rising house costs or lowering wages relative to like cost of living or any of that bullshit, like there are real problems here that you can actually solve, but you're never going to be able to solve them as long as you're like hunched on fucking D-Live schizo posting 24/7, you know? Ableism. I love being ableist.
Of migration. It seems to be because of something else.
Not in your little dorky world of, I found a left-wing report backs up my crap worldview. But in the real world, people can't buy a house. People can't get on the housing ladder. And when it comes to social housing, people are locked out of social housing because all of the social housing gets given to stream after stream of different refugees who pour into this country because our borders were open. This is a massive problem for normal people. But in your little liberal bubble, there are no normal people, and you can keep reading your little report, but they're actually garbage. They're not worth toilet paper, mate.
So to be clear, are you saying... Sorry, no, don't encourage him to do that.
So this is just flat out anti-empiricism. Basically, the reality is what I say it is because I have a few anecdotes of dubious quality. You know, are they right? Are they wrong? You know, who knows? Whatever. But like no study is worth my anecdotes, is essentially what's being said here. If your opponent refuses to behave properly in a debate because their goal is to emotionally drive the narrative for their side, should you deploy the same tactics or just double down on the actual good faith debate tactics? For me, I generally favor aggression. You can even see it in the Deborah So conversation that I had. In the second half of the conversation, I was markedly more aggressive than I was in the first half. No, agreed, Soaked on Left. Yeah, in conversations like this, getting the facts out of the way so you can get to the aggression is really, really important, you know? Of course, ultimately, you're really talking to the audience. Like, you're not really talking to the Nazis or whatever, right? Like, you're trying to move their audience over. They're long gone. Mark Collett, Laura Ingraham, whatever. But you want to be able to... Oh, really quickly. Speaking of the Deborah So thing, I saw this earlier. It was really funny. I posted a Twitter thing of a conservative being weird because I used the term pregnant person before. And Deborah So tweeted out, anyone using the term pregnant people needs to know how ridiculous they sound, which is funny because I know Deborah So is like a lying grifter, but Deborah So said she does believe in the validity of trans people. Like, so she does believe in the existence of trans men. She would use he, him pronouns for trans men. She would call them men. So by her own logic, yeah, like it's like this doesn't even make sense from her perspective, you know, but yeah, whatever, the grift goes. Also, she said she would get back to me with a study, which she never did. It's the study about how it's like trans people transition because they're ashamed of being homosexual or whatever. I don't know. Would you mind answering regarding what has been brought forth? What? I don't know. Don't take Twitter too seriously. I don't understand. Nobody understands.
He's not going to be able to. So I'm going to ask you, Mark, very simple. Are you going to completely disregard any published piece of evidence and scientific, academic work on this?
Yes.
That we can
Well, he was citing them earlier, so I assume...
When it benefits him, obviously. But anything that we brought up, are you going to disregard all of it purely because it comes from academia? Mark, yes or no? Because I need to know if I need to waste time showing why you're wrong or not. Wait, I asked you a yes or no question. I need an answer.
Yes, you will.
I need to get a yes or no on that question.
Where first-time buyers are basically locked out of buying houses. And when you actually go down to the level of council housing, it is virtually impossible for people in the UK to get social housing. There are massive waiting lists. And the reason there are massive waiting lists is because there is a growing population. And the engine for population growth in the UK is mass immigration and the birth rate of newly arrived migrant communities.
So it's entirely possible. I just did get this. Sorry, Matthew. So it's entirely possible that housing prices may be on the rise. However, you're making the argument that housing prices are on the rise because of immigration. When we have a study specifically trying to isolate the variables of house prices and immigration, I must be allowed to finish speaking. Can I appeal to the moderation here, Brittany? Can we get something going on here? I need to step in here.
Okay, yeah. So again, Mark Collett is too brain damaged to understand this. He seems to think that because a given conclusion is taking place, that must mean his explanation for that conclusion is correct. I feel like you need to bring this down to his example. Do you think you could like fake his accent? You know what I mean? All right, Mark. Now listen up. All right. Now housing prices have gone up. Now I say the housing prices have gone up is because the sun's shining, and the more the sun shines, the more the houses are worth, and that brings the price up. What do you say? And then no matter what he responds, you just sort of shout over him. And you can go, that's Australian? I'm doing my own thing, not his. I'm doing my thing, okay? Anyway, no matter what he responds, because it doesn't matter. Like, he's subhuman. Doesn't matter what he says. You can say, I say, the more sun shines in it, the more the sunny shine on the house, the more it goes up. How can that be wrong? Housing prices have gone up, ain't it? You can look at the housing prices. Prices have gone up. Hey. Just continue on as much as you want, you know? No, they haven't gone up because the sun is shining. Was the housing prices going up? Sorry. This accent is rapidly drifting across the Pacific. They sound awfully stupid right now.
£27,200 being added to the value.
Okay, let's finish this damn area.
Recorded over 39 years of index history. Halifax spokesperson.
Brittany, step in. Be assertive. Go.
Yeah, okay, yeah, Mark, let Rose finish what he was going to say.
Once again,
Also, it's always okay to be
house prices may be on
sexist
the
to
rise
far
in the
right
UK.
women.
I'm not contesting that in any way, shape, or form. However,
Because it's what they want.
causes house prices to move is very complex. You're asserting that it's because of migration. However, when we have a study that specifically isolates the variables of immigration and house prices, it doesn't seem like it's the immigration that's driving up house prices. If anything, it is reducing house prices. So I'm not denying the fact that houses are expensive. I am denying the fact. I am denying
No, it's
the
not.
fact
Housing
that
prices
it is
are going
migration
up.
that is driving that increase because you presented no reasonable evidence for it. So I'm going to ask you again my yes or no question from before. Are you going to categorically reject Brittany? Please, this is actually
White people leave the area. It's called white flight. They go to other white areas, and then the house prices go through the roof. And what you're doing is taking isolated slums and ghettos and going, "Ooh, house prices fell marginally in a slum area." Well, maybe they fell marginally in a slum area because the migrants who moved there trashed the place. But overall, they're going through the roof because population is rising and white people are being forced into ever more conflict for the houses in the nice areas thanks to mass immigration. Really simple, really simple.
In the United Kingdom, I don't know the
Brittany,
Yeah, wait, so hold on. We're trying to get something else. So, yeah, you have like 45 seconds uninterrupted. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so once again, the only evidence we have right now for this at the moment seems to go against what you're saying. You've presented no credible evidence to the thing you're talking about. You're just appearing to, well, this is what it seems to be like, specifically in contrary to the academic evidence we have. So I'm going to ask you this is a simple yes or no question, okay? There's no need to go on a monologue about this, Mark. Will you categorically reject any piece of academic literature we cite to you in this debate because it's all controlled by George Soros or whatever? Yes or no? Will you do that?
I'm not giving you a yes or no answer, you limp-wristed weasel.
All right, well, fuck, you got me there.
But imagine calling someone else a weasel when you won't even give a yes or no answer on whether or not you'll reject all empirical evidence on the subject. That was still too many words for him. I don't know if he fully followed that. He said categorically reject. Mr. Collett, Sir, is all words you don't want like made by Jews? Now, can we cut down on that? Did Jews write all bad words? Something like that. That might be enough.
All right, go on, Matthew. You want to say something?
You call him like a weasel. Like you're just not engaging with like a very simple questions, right? Like, so I mean,
because it is obvious that the more people you have on all resources are finite, and the more people you have in an area competing for those finite resources, that inevitably pushes up the cost of
Shouldn't you want to lower the birth rate then?
In a very small area, which the UK is, we are seeing a growing population. Population growth in the UK is driven by mass immigration. That primarily drives white people out of many areas. Those white people
you can build more houses.
Move
no, you
to
can't.
Other white areas, and you see a massive house price rise overall.
So now, we have no evidence that's been established for this whatsoever. You're just rambling with no evidence.
Fell in a small way in that area, but I have just given you the facts that we have just seen the biggest year-on-year rise in house prices, and that coincides with one of the largest years of growing migration and one of the largest years for net migration that we've ever seen.
I have some figures, if I can share them.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the United Kingdom, 86% of population growth is due to immigration, so either direct immigration or indirect immigration, so the children of immigrants.
That's not immigration.
Population grows, there's more demand for houses. There was a study
indirect immigration, like people being born in the country as naturalized citizens.
Or something like that. And they established that due to the current rates of immigration, one new house has to be built in England every 6 minutes. They then looked at the ethnicity of the people who were taking these houses, and they concluded that 90% of new households that are additional in England were headed up by somebody who was born outside the UK. So the growing population in the United Kingdom is increasing the demand for houses. And it's not just houses as well. As we've got a growing population, we've got bigger class sizes in schools, we've got longer queues at the hospital and the doctors. The growing population has an impact on lots of things, not just housing.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to pivot to something else, that's fine. But if we look it up on that as well, you bet we'll be wrong about that as well. But we'll see.
I think Matthew was trying to
go on,
say
Matthew,
something.
Yeah, soaked and left, but it would be white houses.
Like this just
which
doesn't
are
seem
good.
to be. I remember like somewhat recently there was an incident where Canada's immigration seemed to drop pretty substantially, and housing prices kept rising at the exact same rate, right? Like, I mean, I know that I mean, the appeal to like housing prices are rising and immigration is also rising. That doesn't really say anything about the causal relationship, because obviously the things that causally impact the prices of housing are going to be very multifaceted, right? So it's entirely possible that immigration is contributing to a decrease in housing prices, whereas there are just other mechanisms that are pushing in the other direction that are causing an increase in housing prices on the net. But even if immigration did lead to a decrease in housing prices, right, there are no doubt tons of other factors that are also causing an increase in housing prices, right? And so the idea would just be, why wouldn't the response be to, I don't know, build more social housing or change zoning laws and so on to lower the prices of housing, rather than like kicking out all immigrants, when these are policies that we would want to be pursuing anyways, even in the absence of immigration, right?
So again, the answer is always the same from people like yourself. You say a lot, and in between the the answer to what we're saying is, again, we need to change the whole way we do things in the West to mitigate
building more houses. That would be devastating.
Bro, that would be devastating for the West.
And also the other thing that I find amazing about liberal retards is they claim to be green, they want to, they love the countryside, all things like that. But instead of actually pursuing a green policy of a population which isn't growing in an unsustainable manner, they import people from all over the world.
Wait, how is raising the white birth rate in your country different than bringing in what? What's this? What the fuck is that you don't understand? When I want to raise the white birth rate, but I don't want to bring in no stinky immigrants, because then we'd have to build houses. What? That's just, this is such a stupid world. I can't, god damn it.
World, which obviously places huge pressures on the environment.
Hey.
Here in the UK, this extra building has driven several indigenous species of wildlife almost to extinction.
He doesn't give a shit about
it. Causing wildlife collapse. Is that the argument we're on right now?
We are saying that the more people you have in a country and the more development in that country, the less space there is for wildlife. And I am telling you this now, that is another consequence of mass immigration, because mass immigration is what is causing population growth in this country. Are you now arguing that population growth and increased building doesn't affect the wildlife or the countryside?
Depends on how you do it. If you do it in a sustainable capacity, then there are very good steps that we can put into place in order to prevent that from happening. We are not currently talking about like New York, where we're like at the peak of population density and we have no idea how to fit more people into housing, like while doing it sustainably. We're talking about a country with, you know, relatively a lot of open plains and a lot of capabilities for sustainable housing endeavors to be like built and constructed. So it's entirely possible to accommodate for the new population in a way that is sustainable, that doesn't harm the like wildlife population. This feels like a very strange argument.
The idea that the best way.
I mean, I can only talk about my own country, but in Britain, I think it's only something like 5% of the land is built on, but the rest of the land is not available to build on. It's things like lakes, mountains, pastures, farmlands, forests, that kind of stuff. So if we're going to build on other areas of land now in the United Kingdom, we're damaging the environment, and I think that's a serious issue. I mean, in Britain, we're now building on wetland. We're building houses on wetland, which are not safe and which is incredibly damaging for the species in those areas. We're damaging their habitats.
So currently just 6% of the UK is being built on. Do you think that the other like 94%?
You are a complete mong. I knew he was going to say this. I knew he was going to say this.
Well, I just answered that in what I
said. And so you're telling me, I'm not sure. So you're telling me that the other 94% is all you can't build on that?
You're such an idiot. Your idiocy is amusing to me on
Mark, please, can Laura, because we're talking about something specifically.
I'm soy-facing at how funny your stupidity is.
You do realise that farmland is developed land used to grow food.
Understanding. So
you can't put houses on it, or the people can't eat. You absolute midget moron. About 34% of the.
Yeah, we can't get rid of the traditional farming system. That would be bad for the environment. We need to preserve the millions of acres of farmland to save the environment. So this is another example of a person making arguments they don't care about and don't believe in. Mark Kola doesn't give a fuck about the environment. Obviously not. He doesn't give a fuck about humans. Why would he care about the environment? You know, if you actually cared about addressing both of these problems at once, dealing with environmental concerns and having more space for housing construction, you would end meat farming. Something like 30 to 40% of all of the land in the United States is dedicated to growing grain for cows to eat so we can eat the cows. In a resource sense, it's remarkably inefficient. And it does take up a ridiculous amount of space. If you actually care, that's something that you would try to move on. Yeah. Bloomberg looks at land use. Dude, these guys in this game. Yeah, here you go. Look at this. It's wild. There we go. Jesus. Yeah, there we go. Wow, 41% of the land in the US is used for feeding livestock. Nearly half of all of the land in all of the United States, the third largest country on the planet, is livestock feeding. That is wild. Damn. Yeah, here, the red right here, this is housing. There you go. Yeah, I've reached my 1 free article limit. And a lot of this is rural housing as well. Yeah, food we eat right here. All this land right here is growing all of the food that we eat. And then this is growing the food livestock eat. And then this is where the cows live. Like, Jesus. Yeah. It's ridiculous.
UK is undeveloped. That is it. And if you develop on that, death to all the animals that live there. You gimp.
The figures that you've just looked at, 6%, yeah? Have you looked at what the other 94% is?
That's what I asked you about. So I asked you, is the 94% all undeveloped?
The other 95% is things like mountains, forests, lakes, rivers, sea, that kind of stuff, coastline, farmlands, pastures, that kind of stuff. So it's not like we've got an extra 20% where we can build houses here. The other 94% is in use.
So to be clear, only 6% of the UK can be built on right now. Is that what you're telling me? I'm going to check this. I'm not saying you're wrong.
And flattening mountains, yes.
Okay. I'll read into that a bit. Do you have any?
I'll read into the fact there are mountains. Yes, there are mountains, and no, you can't live on the top of them or farm them.
Okay. So
what are you saying? The dwarves are better than
we
you?
Have any? So what you're saying? I've never heard this before. That migration is causing environmental sustainability issues. Do you guys have any report on this? Any study on this? Anything that we can look at, or is it just individual numbers?
Do you have a report?
Oh my god! Do you report on land usage statistics? The United Kingdom. I'm going to have a bust in me gits. I'm going to have a gaff in me trousers. You want to report analyzing something instead of just going off your feelings? Jesus.
That tells you that a rapidly
I'm
growing
population
a giggle at your
expense.
Place increased stress.
I would imagine that this is something that environmental protection agencies would have a bunch of reports on if this was real. So do you have anything?
And another point would just be that, I mean, like, even if we were to grant that an increasing population contributes to a detriment to the environment, that doesn't mean that on the net the impact of immigration on the environment is negative, right? In fact, I would argue that by and large, the most important thing that we could do to be combating environmental damages is things like innovation, building out the clean energy infrastructure, because then it won't matter how big our population is, because we won't adding new people to the population won't cause them to use more resources that are environmentally unsustainable. And it just so happens that we have a lot of evidence that immigration increases rates of innovation, right?
I'm sure it does. All those Somalian rocket scientists, all those Nigerian brain surgeons, all those Pakistani.
I don't know why you would say Nigerian when
Yeah, why would you say Nigerian brain surgeons when we actually have a fuck ton of really good doctors from Nigeria? What? Wait, why would you? He's so fucking stupid, dude. They're literally better than us at medicine. Because when he hears Nigeria, he just thinks black. He doesn't actually know anything about Nigeria. Yeah, he just thinks, how could black people be smarter than white people? That's it. Yeah. Well, this is what racism does to you, folks. It just plummets. Your IQ just plummets. Yes. Oh, if you guys are wondering why there are links there, some of them are spurious and some of them are more meaningful. So a large part of innovation and immigration correlating is probably down to the fact that countries that are wealthy enough to innovate frequently are also countries that have the wealth to attract a lot of immigrants. But I do think that there's a causative element there, something a little bit more meaningful. And if I had to guess at it, I would say that innovation tends to be more common in countries with strong liberal values. Authoritarian countries or countries that are very repressive or autocratic or prejudiced tend to have a lot of regimented social systems that make something like innovation, which is, you know, most frequently brought about in freer societies, a lot harder to do. So my guess would be it comes down to a country that would immigrate would be more willing to innovate. You know?
Nigerian migrants are typically, they typically do pretty well from what I remember when it comes to
I've been shown progress happens quicker in environments with different
viewpoints. You know, I think these guys need to be shipped to live in one of these migrant
So to be
ghettos.
clear,
There's two things to note. So I mean, firstly, just as a statistical matter, right? Like, it does happen to be the case that a crazy disproportionate amount of people who contribute to large, important innovations are not born in the U.S. and are in fact immigrants or the children of first-generation immigrants. I mean, it's just a fact. I can send you studies on this. Now, if your argument is there are certain demographics who are less likely to be innovative, I mean, that's fine, right? But I take it that at best, immigration would be a proxy for other more important metrics, more telling metrics, like things like maybe IQ or something like that, right? And so, if your argument is we shouldn't be taking in
mass immigration raises the IQ of Western nations.
I have no idea how you gathered that from the words that I just said. My point is just that if your concern is like, well, we shouldn't be taking immigration from these specific areas because they're less likely to have higher IQs and therefore they'll contribute less to innovation. I mean, at best, I would just ask, like, why would we use nationality as a proxy for IQ rather than just having an immigration that selects for IQ directly, right? That seems like a way more sensible way.
He's doing the thing again, the whole like, well, if you really care about IQ, then why not why not discriminate based directly on IQ? Why like do the national, like he's doing the thing where it's like trying to unveil the irrationality of their point, but like it's not irrational because he's lying. He doesn't care about IQ, he cares about race.
Way of going about it that would harness more innovation.
So
we're not saying that we should have immigration based on IQ.
I'm saying that's the most, like, based on the premises that Mark has laid out, that seems like the most reasonable conclusion, right? Because if his objection
there are plenty of immigrants that come to the United Kingdom that have high IQ that still are an issue. I mean, Chinese immigrants, for example, typically high IQ, but they're still not us. They still create their own little Chinatowns in every single.
So you don't actually care about the IQ. The real thing is the fact that they're not like us, right? That's what you're going to fall back on if we contest the IQ points.
We don't replace whether they're high IQ or low IQ.
Yeah, you'd have other arguments, sure, but the point that we're just making right now is that the line of dialogue was that the claim was that one of the reasons we'd have for combating immigration is that adding more immigrants is harmful to the environment. My claim was that actually adding more immigration increases innovation, and innovation is the most important thing in terms of increasing the health of the environment so that we can be innovating new clean energy sources and so on. And then Mark's claim was, well, there are certain demographics of people who don't seem to be very innovative, and so why would we take in any immigration from those places? And my claim is that because even if most people from certain places aren't very innovative, there are still, of course, going to be outliers in any sample set, right? And so we would still want to get those outliers if we want to maximize innovation. And so if the claim is we shouldn't take immigration from certain places because they're less likely to be innovative, because they're like have lower IQs, my point is this seems more like we should be selecting directly for IQ rather than using nationality as like a very imprecise proxy for that.
But why would we even need to have this discussion when there's the option for us just to say, let's not have them? Why,
because see, this is the problem. Like you're not gonna, you can't do this like, well, I've assessed your eugenicist, xenophobic priors, and I've determined that it would be more efficient. Like this is like going up to like in World War II, like going up to like a German Nazi or whatever, and going like, okay, so you want like breathing space for the Aryans, right? Then why not use the Jews in the concentration camps as forced labor to like, or was war slaves to help you conquer like territories in the East and West? Like why just kill them? Like this doesn't make any sense. You should be like using them to like lead the front lines against like the Western forces coming in from France or whatever. And it's like, they just want to kill Jews, dude. It's not deep. You know? They did? Yeah, no, they did. But you know what I mean. You get the point. Like, you understand. I mean, I'm like, well, let me live. Let me live. Wait, now I can't. Gotta hit the button. Hit the button.
We're just rebutting the environmental. Right?
Well, why?
So to be clear, you guys don't actually you don't care about getting high IQ people into your country. You just want to have don't want to have no white people in your country.
No, what we're saying is we want white people to remain a super majority.
Okay, so then don't bring up the things about IQs because you don't care about that.
What we believe is bringing in large numbers of migrants that change the culture, that change the racial makeup, that place huge numbers of pressures upon the indigenous people is a bad thing. And we also believe that all the money spent on these cultural cohesion programs, all of the money spent on trying to make these people more British would be better spent training our own people, enriching our own people, and actually making life better for the indigenous people of these islands. Why not just put our own people first?
So migration, investments and integration, stuff like that for migration, it's a short-term investment for what's most often a long-term gain. I have a question for you, Mark. So if I told you right now that I had a study on hand that demonstrated how immigration improves innovation, would you want to hear it, or are you just going to call me like a soy cuck? And then
no, I'm going to call you a soy boy.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That is literally all I'm going to do, because you are the captain of crap studies and reports that mean nothing. If I said, if you walk out in the rain, you will get wet, you would say, well, actually, I've got a Soros report here that says if I'm in the rain, I actually get drier, because you're an idiot. You're an absolute midwit who can't put one and one together and make two.
Mark,
I say put one and one together and you make 78.
So when you've cited,
you have to do that to justify your position.
Mark, notice when you've cited like reports or studies, Roserist and I have looked into them. We've looked at the methodology, or we've said if we don't have time to do that, we'll look into the methodology later. That's because we're not complete fucking schizos, right? That's because when we have evidence that might contradict our worldview, we say, oh, we might want to look more into this and examine the methodology to see if it's saying anything interesting or not, right? What your approach seems to be is whenever you have, you'll cite studies all day so long as they confirm the conclusion that you're hoping to confirm. But as soon as you get a study or a report that seems to contradict your worldview, you immediately dismiss it as, oh, this is funded by Soros, right? I mean, it's just not a way that serious people like approach finding out
specifically in my introduction that there is something called observable reality.
That's AKA my feelings.
You think I got this nothing? I got this nothing.
You think complex economic?
You need a report to tell you that if you
nothing. You're not telling me when you look at the window, you don't see like the graphs for how bad migration is. There's like the reflection in the window. You don't see that. I thought everybody saw that, Matthew. I don't know what this is.
It's night time in China. I'm looking outside. It's day. I can see the sun, you bloody midwit.
So to be clear, so your main citation, you categorically reject academic studies, Mark. So your thing is just
categorically rejects economic studies that don't agree with the
true, fair enough. So, but the main thing is radar is just like observable reality. So, like, what if I told you, Mark, that I mean, a few years ago, I actually went to the UK, and my observable reality there was that migration was excellent for the UK. It was driving down house prices, was improving immigration.
It was to be fair, they've always been this bad. It's just I think they're like
the
pretense is going away.
I told you, house prices are increasing.
No. But I went there, and my observable reality was that I saw the house prices were going up, but migration was actually bringing it down by 1.7%. That's what I intuited.
To be honest, your observable reality could be anything. Because
perfect, you got it. Excellent. Thank you, Mark, for proving my point. Observable reality is dog shit. It's pointless. That's why we need studies. That's why we need analyses. Thank you, Mark. God, I love you. You're so good at this. Oh.
I don't think we need a study to prove things which are common sense. I mean,
in the UK, black students have nearly identical GCSE test scores as white students. It's soaked on those Jews.
I think it was around 100 girls that were affected, and 34 people were arrested and then all released without charge. So those people do not show up in any studies because they were released without charge. There are plenty of things that go on when you look out of your window that you're not getting a study.
Dude, really?
I'm sorry, Laura. You've been decently polite here, Laura. So I don't want me to. But the issue now is that okay. So what is me and Malthy supposed to do right now? We can't do anything because if we are to provide you with a piece of evidence demonstrating that maybe conviction rates and biases in the criminal justice system actually ends up being worse for non-white minorities, then you guys are just going to say, well, the study is imperfect. So how is me and Malthy supposed to respond to this right now? There's nothing you can do because you guys have shut down all other avenues.
Take for example in the UK, you have. When you look at the people who are locked up for terror offences, they are overwhelmingly people who are either non-white or from a religious.
So Mark is not addressing anything I'm saying. Laura, do you want to address what I said?
There is some special reason.
Random merger.
Yeah, we're just rambling now again.
And that's why it happens. But we're saying maybe it'd be better if these people weren't here to fill our jails. We don't need them here. Equally, you people keep talking about the innovation that immigration brings. Well, if these people are so innovative, why haven't they innovated in their ancestral homelands? If these Africans are so innovative, why isn't Africa Wakanda?
So if I tell you about developmental economics and I talk about the poverty,
He's Marvel movie brain, dude. The soy was coming from inside the skull.
That's worth mentioning is that there is a lot of evidence suggesting that being exposed to poverty
if your sociology is so valid, then
and there's actually evidence
why isn't Marvel happening?
That innovation correlates positively with social spending because when when children are less exposed to poverty or desperate economic conditions when they're children, they're more likely to be innovative, right? But it's also the case, right? Like this also, like, even if I were to grant almost all of your premises, right? Let's say that there are almost everyone in, say, Africa is not innovative, but then of course there are some outliers who are, right? Now, of course, that on the aggregate is going to result in like less innovation in those countries. But
why does Mouthy keep doing that? I have no idea why Mouthy Infidel keeps doing this. He keeps doing this. Well, okay, so assuming some of your premises are correct, I still can't help but notice that your Nazi ranting is illogical. I don't know why he keeps doing this.
Because even the people who are innovative don't have like the infrastructure in the society that they live in to sort of realize that potential, right? But that doesn't mean that if we brought them over to the US, they wouldn't be able to do so or contribute positively to innovation, right?
So we got about like 5 minutes, and we're going to start going and reading some of the questions. So
I don't think they have much to say about that, Matthew.
Just in relation to studies, I mean, if I said to you, oh, I've moved to this city where I'm a minority and nobody speaks the same language as me, nobody dresses the same, I can't buy my food, I can't buy my clothes,
but
he's
doing it on premises that I wouldn't.
The same religious building as me, etc., etc., etc. Would you require a study to demonstrate why that's a bad thing, or would it just be?
No, I don't. Well, I mean, why it's a bad thing? I mean, that's going to depend on like what your morals are or what your values are. I mean, what I would just say is, of course, we don't need a study to prove everything, right? The point is like, so like if you were to say I go out and get rained on and I become wet, of course we wouldn't need a study for that. That's obviously easily observable. The problem is the things that we've been talking about throughout this debate for the most part. So like complex causal interactions between economic, between immigration and prices or immigration and wages. These are very multifaceted things. So like, for example, immigration might increase. We might speculate that immigration could increase wages because they increase the demand for labor because they, buy products, thus creating increased demand. We could also speculate that they decrease wages because they increase the supply of labor. And same thing with housing prices. There are a lot of different mechanisms at play here that we could, theoretically talk about and speculate. And so it's not at all intuitive or readily observable what the net impact of these kinds of things are. And that's why we need more detailed statistical analysis. And so the point is, when me and Rose Rist say that we need studies because these things aren't easily observable, what Mark will do is he'll do like a Mott and Bailey type move where he pivots to a different claim. He'll say, of course, it's easily observable. The fact that house prices are rising is easily observable, but that's not the thing we were saying wasn't easily observable. What we were saying isn't easily observable is the specific impact of immigration on housing prices or things like that, right? And that's not easily observable at all, right? That's like, obviously, that requires closer attention and disaggregating various causal mechanisms and so on.
To speak to what you said as well, Laura, of like the detriment of like, social cohesion or whatever and stuff like that. We do actually have studies on this, and this is something that Mouthy mentioned at the very beginning, but we never really talked about. There are issues that can occur as an effect of like the things that we're talking about. Absolutely, we're not denying those exist. However, we do know what we need to do in order to resolve these things. So I think the two major factors right now that tends to bring about better social cohesion and more like integration and more people being able to be unanimous, feel safer in the neighborhoods, being more likely to like help other people on the streets and stuff like that, which are generally seen as markers of social cohesion, are things like limiting, like housing segregation, people living in different areas, and improving economic equity and economic equality between different demographic groups. Those things seem to have very positive effects on the things that you talk about, Laura, and will lead to society in which... Yeah.
Two additional things. Yeah. One additional thing would be like allowing more people into universities, because universities are an institution where races cooperate with one another. And another thing would be like increasing the rise of unions, because unions are another possible mechanism through which large groups of people who are often racially diverse could interact with one another and cooperate more intimately. So yeah, there are a bunch of things we could do to address this problem.
The tone of the conversation has
when it comes to house prices, I mean, to buy a house in my city, it's maybe £200,000. In the next city, just next door, which is a Muslim city, basically, you can buy a house for 30 grand. If you go to the whitest areas in my city, the house prices are just absolutely mental. Now, I don't think
they don't know how math works
to say that it's because of immigration that's happening, but you can see
there'll be gentrification more likely. And there are a wide range of different things that you can do from a housing market policy perspective that I'm afraid the intricacies of that might be a bit out of the wheelhouses for this debate specifically, but that you can do in order to combat some of the most negative effects of gentrification. A bunch of policy we can do for example, to change zoning laws to make the construction of certain housing more easy and to drive down prices of certain types of housing. You can also look into things like public housing programs in order to further like capitalize on those types of things in order to make things better. So there are a wide range of different policies to exist that are made to address the things that you're talking about, Laura, but it also depends on like the job situations in those areas and how much the average Turner. So it's complicated. But just saying like, oh, it's all migration and kind of cutting off there is very simplistic, and we have things that we know.
It's worth noting really quickly that it's not like, we would do.
By the way, when he says combat gentrification, what he means is white people should be forced to live in horrible immigrant areas.
That is exactly that was one of my 3 prescriptions. You're right. Do you notice how good of a discussion we were having before you butted in, Mark? How me, Laura, and Mouthy, we were having like a nice productive discussion, and now we're back to the screeching.
We're gonna get into the Q&A.
Laura makes Mark Collett makes Laura look like a powerhouse.
We'll get closing statements after the Q&A as well. So
yeah, I just want to say. On that note, it's not like we're saying like, oh, well, we should, put all these money into these programs. Well, firstly, doing away with zoning laws would go a long way. That doesn't require any, that doesn't require any money at all. It's just changing like regulations and so on. But it's not like we're saying like we should take all these measures, but if we didn't have immigration, we wouldn't have to take these measures because we would want to be taking these measures anyways, right? Like zoning laws and housing policy in the U.S. is like broken immigration or no immigration, right? And so the point is we have these things which we would want to be doing anyways, and it just so happens that doing these things also alleviates the negative impact of immigration that you're appealing to here. And so it doesn't really seem like in dealing with this issue, we should be at all appealing to immigration.
All right. So from Hagen, thank you for the super chat. He said, "Did you know that 13% of the population of London commits 50% of the knives attacks?" Okay. All righty.
This is what humor passes for there. This is the absolute epitome of their
the population in the United Kingdom and 12% of the prison population. So the figures from the United States are pretty much mirrored in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that if we want to.
Don't you bloody know that's because of all those terrible white racists who make black people do awful things? Educate yourself, young woman.
People will say it's due to socio-economic impacts, but actually there's not much difference between white people in poverty and black people in poverty in the United Kingdom, but there's a huge difference in crime, especially violent crime.
There's a lot of other things that have to do with this conversation specifically, but if you want, maybe I can bring up this Rome and we can argue for that instead. But so when it comes to poverty and specifically those effects, poverty does have some effect specifically on crime rates and stuff like that. But it seems like from the research I've seen, it's not necessarily poverty in itself that is the key factor there. It seems to be the degradation of important aspects of communities that tend to be in poverty that is really what's being addressed and what is being kind of like found there as a latent variable when people analyze poverty and crime. So things like the strength of institutions, and then there was a second thing which I can't quite remember as for why that was, but there are a wide range of different factors, social cultural, social political, socioeconomic, that all tend to lead to the types of criminal like overrepresentations in criminal outcomes for different groups of people. Then there's also, because we're looking at past just crime rate, we're looking specifically at incarceration, we introduce another element there of potential biases and potential differences in strategies when it comes to things like policing, when it comes to things like the operations of the criminal justice system, that further change the statistics. So there's like a whole chain of events here that we need to analyze and look at specifically to try to understand the image of, or try to understand the explanations for why that overrepresentation exists.
Is we need to write an encyclopedia to explain this.
Crime is complicated, Mark.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a complicated subject. You telling me I'm gonna have to read one of them Jew books in order to understand it?
So the explanation ends up being white people's fault. That is your.
No one is saying it's white people's fault. Okay, it turns out crime is complicated. Okay, it's something that society's had to deal with for hundreds and hundreds of years. If we just had, Mark Collett on the politically provoked panel that could discuss this, then I don't think we'd be in the position we are right now when it comes to crime. Turns out crime is complicated. There's a lot of things that we can do. There's a lot of things we can talk about it in order to be able to understand it fully. I mean, the implication that Mark and maybe Laura seems to be implying a bit here is that there's some form of like inherent genetic thing going on there. I mean, we talk a lot about evidence and studies here.
Of black people and find out that they're conducive to crime.
Exactly. Just look at the window. You can see the genome of the black people, and then you can understand exactly where the crime gene is. Like, I don't know what to say.
You realize like any study that would try to disaggregate.
I actually think I was worried that as time would go on, things would get worse, but I actually think the energy of Rose and Mouthy has gotten a lot better with time. They've gotten more jovial and lighthearted. Like they don't take this conversation very seriously. There's some banter between them. They're quick to condescend. As soon as Mark Collett started talking again, like Rose's first response was like, "Oh, we were having an actual conversation for a second until you started vomiting again." Mouthy's the word. Well, I think, I don't think Mouthy's done a bad job. I just think that he's like Twitter brained. Obviously, I don't like him very much, and I think the reasons why I might play into this a little bit, but I think it's just like a Twitter brain thing. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know because I don't know that much about him, but I feel like Mouthy might feel dismissive towards the idea that haughty rhetorical strategies might be effective against Nazis, as opposed to trying to outlogic them purely. You know what I mean? Very lay rationale. The poverty thing was a lie, by the way. The black poverty rate was 30% in the UK, and the white poverty rate is 10%. Well, are you telling me? Are you telling me that Nazis would lie when trying to make a are you telling me that they would inaccurately represent racial statistics and it's part of making a point as to why we need an all-white country. That's bananas. I really don't want to fucking die here because the bonfire is all the way back there. Oh fuck. Don't just... No, I hit the knock button. I didn't mean to. I think that was the point she was trying to make. Wasn't she trying to say that black and white people in the UK have similar economic circumstances? Yeah, I've heard the UK Boris government going to ship asylum seekers to Rwanda. Well, you know what? Rwanda sounds like Wakanda, so maybe it's better than where we are, okay?
What the specific genes are that cause black people to have more crimes is going to be like also very complicated.
Yeah,
right? Like beyond biology.
Listen to this snark. Well. It's absolutely fabulous. This is the most. This is.
Wait, why aren't you a geneticist, Mark?
Of saying he didn't do nothing wrong, isn't it? This is the most.
What are you talking about?
Being a meme.
Wait. What kind of fucked up British appropriation was that? The racist meme is he didn't do nothing. What the fuck was that? He didn't do nothing wrong. What the fuck? It's so funny. Like he's in the second most powerful Anglo country, and he's trying to ape our memes, and he can't even do it right. He can't. He did nothing wrong. Like he can't. Like his stupid degenerate English mannerisms bleed through, even when he's trying to make fun of other racial groups. It's crazy. It's like the natural genetic inferiority of English people is so severe that it bleeds through into everything else they do.
I literally live in memes. This is gold. These are just like
that comes from there. Everything comes from America.
Mark has to be a 4chan machine learning program. I don't know what else it could be. I don't know what to tell you.
I feel like Mark like pre-recorded a bunch of things to say and is just like pressing play on his fucking like laptop.
It has to be.
Like I can't
good.
fathom how
This
you
is
could
good
listen
banter.
to the things I say and then ramble about nothing for like 5 minutes and just address none of the things that I previously said.
Any normal people listening to what the reason
people like me.
myself and Laura
Dog, do you think you're
YouTube
normal?
is
You don't
because
have
hundreds
you
and
don't
hundreds
have a
of
single
thousands of
social
people are
media
listening to us.
platform.
Hundreds of thousands of people are listening to us. People don't actually want to listen to jerks like you, and that's why YouTube had to get rid of people like us, and they have to build up jerks like you.
If people don't want to listen to people like us, then why have our broad ideas been the dominant form of political?
Remember what I said about him being bullied in high school, and this is him trying to compensate for it? You make fun of me while you can't. Oh, did they say jokes? Wait, was that him trying to say jokes? Was that his pathetic effort to say the word jokes? Oh my god. That's rough.
Political progress over the past decade.
System to get ahead above.
So now we're talking about the anti-white system. Now we're on intent again, which you went to move away and you said wasn't important before because you can't defend it.
I love white people so much. I want them to benefit from innovation from all kinds of people around the world.
All those innovative Somalians, because Somalia is the hub of the world's innovative.
Mark,
Well, I've already spoken to this point. Right? At best, nationality would be like an imperfect proxy for things that are relevant to innovation, right? It's not an argument.
Word salad incoming.
Wait, I have a question, Mark. I have a question for you. Hold on. A simple question, Mark.
I don't know what to do with this.
No, wait, it's fine. We're past the point. Mark, do you?
It's like trying to explain how a plane works to a simpleton, right? Mark, listen. This thing, when it goes fast enough, it can fly. It's made out of metal. How can it fly? Balloons fly because they're lighter than air. Okay, that's okay, but it's like a thing with the wind patterns. Anyway, planes can fly. No, it can't. Just hold up some metal. You can't. Metal can't float. What are you talking about? You can literally like just Google a plane or like a video, like anything. Like you just look up anything. Oh yeah, it's you. You just want me to like you see observable reality. I see a bit of metal on my desk. I toss it. I just whoop. It's heavy. Whoop. Do you think you'll tell me that's going to fly? Some Soros papers gotta tell me that could fly. I'm sorry. It's not much to analyze here. That was my phone, by the way.
You love black people.
That's a good question.
If you want a genuine, honest answer to that, the answer is, if they are in their ancestral homeland, I have absolutely no problem with them. In fact, I think all peoples of the world deserve to have their own ancestral homeland, deserve to be in charge of their own destiny, and I do believe that there is definitely a place in the world for people of African descent. That place is not Europe.
But do you love...
In the same way that I respect Islamic communities in the Middle East. I think that China deserves to be Chinese. I think Japan deserves to be Japanese. I think Europe deserves to be European.
But Mark, do you love all black people?
I've just said, I think that all races have the right to thrive and take their destiny in their own hands and have control over their ancestral homeland.
Yes or no? Do you love all black people?
What kind of stupid
question? All right, we're gonna move on to some of the questions. All right, so from the Thin Red Line said, to the lefties, London has some of the highest property prices in the world, yet London is majority non-white. Do you think the majority of the non-whites could afford to live there if they were in public subsidized housing? And if the non-whites left, do you think that the house prices would fall?
Yeah, I don't actually have a strong view on the relationship between immigration and housing policy. This just isn't really something I've researched at all. My point in this debate wasn't to take a strong affirmative view that immigration reduces housing prices or doesn't increase housing prices. My point was just to say that I don't think, come on, bro, it's obvious, just look outside is like a good justification for taking an affirmative position on that relatively complicated economic question.
So was the question for us to explain why housing prices are high in the UK, yet there's a lot of non-white people in the UK? Was that, or did I misunderstand the question?
You want me to read it again?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah. So I did the lefties. London has some of the highest property prices in the world, yet London is majority non-white. Do you think the majority of the non-whites could afford to live there if they were in public subsidized housing? And if the non-whites left, do you think that the house prices would fall?
Stop.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is asking exactly. I'm not sure. All I know.
We can move on.
Yeah, is that study I said it before? That's that's what I know, but I don't know the intricacies of specifically.
All right, so for all panelists, why are these massive demographic changes taking place?
Okay, if anyone wants like an actual killer answer to this, okay, here's the actual killer answer. First of all, immigrants, this depends, like, obviously, like, depending on the group of immigrants, but oftentimes immigrants are actually wealthier on average than the average member of your native population because it takes a lot of money to move countries. And as a product of that, you're going to be getting people who are disproportionately wealthy, which means they can disproportionately contribute economically. Secondly, when immigrants come to your country, you're actually getting a net population bonus benefit better than if you had native people have children. You know why? Because when native people have children, that's 18 years of a child being dependent on the social systems within a country. 18 years of them eating and learning and attending school and getting boo-boos that they have to go to the hospital to scrape up, whatever, you know. When an immigrant, an adult immigrant, comes to America or to England, they are ready to work. That day, they are ready. And they do work. So at worst, immigration and the population increases that you would get from it would have the same impact on housing prices that you would have from just native population increases, just based on people fucking more, you know? And there are potentially benefits that you could get where you would actually prefer the workforce to be immigrant-based, as we often do, especially since with a lot of our immigration programs, we specifically look for certain sets of skills which allow us to, God damn this woman, which allow us to more effectively find immigrants with work skills that we need. Why is Vaush getting mogged so hard by the Sharon Laney? Yeah, well, you know, soul level 1. Hard out here.
Simultaneously in virtually every white country, while taking place in virtually no non-white countries? And why are white people the only people morally forbidden from wishing to remain homogenous?
So, I mean, we can talk about this. So, one
retarded shit. God damn it. I didn't know. Just let me hit
white country while taking place in virtually no non-white countries. And why are white people the only people morally forbidden from wishing to remain homogenous?
So
They're all
we
morally
can talk about
forbidden.
this. So one of the major factors is that a lot of countries that tend to be, that tend to be have a lot of white people in them have historically benefited from a wide range of different phenomena. You know, things like colonialism, for instance, imperialism, that has gotten them a lot of total wealth in those nations, and therefore they're at a higher stage of development. Usually, that seems to be one of the major explanations for those things. And because of that, when we're discussing things like, I can answer that question, and then you can answer that question, and then we can move on.
Nations already at a much higher stage of development. The way you people always frame this as if colonialism was some magic thing that placed the West above all else. But if you look at, say, ancient Rome, if you look at the Roman Empire was magnificent compared to anything that sub-Saharan Africa was doing at the same time. How do you?
So
This
there's
is
a lot of different things.
absolutely
So
not
explaining like historical development from an economic and civilizational perspective is something that's very complicated, and that's something that I don't have a full understanding of, and I very much doubt that Mark Collett does either. But there are a wide range of different theories for this. A lot of it can have to do with specific things like geography. So, for instance, I know that there is a book which I think there's some things that are mixed about it, but I think on the whole, I think that some of the points that it talks about maybe takes them too far, but generally are agreed to be somewhat accurate. And I think that the book is called Guns, Germs, and Steel, and it talks about a wide range of different geographic factors that specifically put specific geographic locations have an advantage to development by virtue of weather patterns, climate, arable land, like temperatures.
Wasn't a good bit
those
of
types
Rome
things that put certain
in
civilizations at
Africa?
advantage.
Or
But, I mean,
am I thinking of a different
incredibly
big
complicated.
empire?
The definition, or the thing that Mark Collett seems to be implying here, is that there is something like genetic inherent in the, I suppose, like the European genome that just makes them pro-development, and everybody else from other parts of the world are anti-development. But
they owned
once again,
Egypt, yeah.
evidence for that is incredibly short.
Civilization. Europeans developed civilization. Certain racial groups didn't.
What the fuck? Europeans developed civilization. Oh, damn, that's correct. Oh, that so we like all the rest of the planet was hunter gatherers, and then we had no. There are tons of non-European empires throughout antiquity. He's specifically like going after sub-Saharan Africa, and guys, like, can we be real? Okay, there's a reason why sub-Saharan Africa doesn't have some rich fucking grandiose civilization like tapestry the way that like Europe does, and it's because it's fucking hot. Okay, like, don't be stupid. Like, fuck, like obvious. If you take a look at this area that's like majority 110-degree jungles and deserts, like, can you believe that it doesn't have the same empires as the large verdant fields of Central Europe? Like, no. Question mark? Now, listen, I'm not like a historian or an anthropologist, but I've written studies, or not written studies, oh my god. I have read studies which have made a pretty compelling like argument for the fact that like the like baseline environment that you're starting with in different parts of the world just makes some shit easier than other parts. Like, I hope nobody here would argue that an empire is equally likely to spring up in Siberia as it is in like France, right? Like, yeah, obviously, like, when nomadic humans were wandering the world, like, some areas were going to a little bit of a harder time, a little bit. A smidge. Yeah, there's like ancient Egypt, there's the Mesopotamian Empire, there's like the Mansa Musa shit, there's the Nubian Empire, there's India, the Indian Empire, the Golden Age of Islam. There are like 17 fucking Chinese dynasties. There's so much shit all around the world. It's dumb. He's focusing on sub-Saharan Africa specifically, but like, yeah, you know. The funny thing is too, by the way, is that weren't like parts of Europe, yeah, the Aztecs, the Incas, the Mayans, parts of Europe were considered to be like barbarian savages for a really fucking long time. Yeah, like it's not like the Franks were like, oh dude, oh oui, my Nordic, my brethren, as fellow Europeans, oui, we are both white. Like, no, they thought we're barbarians. You know, it's just, yeah, it's dumb. It's dumb.
Why do you have to explain that away with some sort of complex, sort of 2,000-page report?
Because it's a complex issue.
Oh my fucking god. Why do you have to explain the history of all human civilization with a complex report? What can't we just keep it simple so I can understand?
Talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of years of human history.
Look outside your window.
So
it's civilization,
okay, so
innit?
what's your explanation? Stop, what's your explanation? Why?
Different people are more
Say it directly. Be explicit. Don't tiptoe around it. Come on, Mark. I know what you want to say.
Different racial groups are more predisposed to being good at certain things.
I would love to see a citation for that. Oh my God, that would be
civilizations.
That'd be beautiful.
White people are better at creating civilizations, and we should be left to do that alone in peace.
Can you send me any form of evidence specifically that white people inherently, genetically have a predisposition towards this that other groups do not?
Just like outside.
The whole of European history.
Good one. So once again, now we're talking about something that is hyper complex and there's
maybe we can have
citation needed. Did Europeans create anything, Laura? Did Europeans create anything?
Mark, maybe this is the disconnect. Like throughout this debate, you've like repeatedly demonstrated a failure to be able to like separate that like having a data point and then having a causal explanation for that data point are like two different things, right? And you keep trying to substitute one for the other, right? And it's like very transparent. I don't know how you're not picking up on this. Maybe it's like intentional, but like the point is when we say like when you say our explanation for this data point is complicated and then yours isn't, and then we say, okay, well, why is it not complicated? And then you just appeal to the fact that the data point like exists, right? And it's like, well, that's not really like, you're not talking about the thing that we're trying to talk about, right? Like these are two different things, right?
It's basically like correlation causation thing. Like that's
European
like really what this
people,
is.
Whether they be Hungarian, French, German, British, create these wonderful civilizations. Other racial groups did the same. Certain racial groups didn't. You can draw inference from that. And I don't need a 20,000 or a 200,000 page report. Okay. You just look at history. You look at the way the world developed. You can draw inference from that. It's observable reality.
So,
the difference between me and you is I look at these things and I draw what is the logical, simple, common sense conclusion.
That's right.
You try to reinterpret everything that is common sense and normalcy and place it within your political framework. But to do so, it's akin to hammering a square peg into a round hole. And that is why you need these complex, wordy, word salad nonsense answers to very simple questions.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I'm just curious about, maybe we can approach it from this angle, right? So like you're saying that there are like two competing hypotheses in terms of explaining why white people have flourished and non-white people haven't. And you're saying that yours is the more simple one. I'm not sure why that would follow, right? Because you're positing as a part of your explanation certain genetic differences between the races. And I guess I would just need to see evidence for that. Whereas we're just positing that
why do black people run faster and play basketball? Is it because of their socioeconomic environment? Does the socioeconomic environment cause...
Well, the fact that there are some genetic differences between white people and black people doesn't give us reason to postulate that there's like a specific genetic difference that accounts for like civilization building capacity, right? Those are just two different
things. So things like Mark, I have a question. Wait, no. So Mark,
like just
do you want to go? Nothing.
Yeah, just really quickly. Like the one point I was trying to get out.
Hello?
I was interrupted. Was that the point is we know.
I'm sorry. I hope it's not boring with me being quiet. It's just there's genuinely nothing to like. Mark Collett is acting like the ableist stereotypes that I play out when making fun of far-right people. There's not really a point in engaging with it, because he's literally just saying, like, why would I need complicated explanations when I have simple assumptions? It's actually like a joke that I would make to make fun of him, but he's doing it unironically. It is the beyond parody meme. This guy's kind of an asshole. You can believe it.
Know that sometimes genetics can... Oh, sorry, wait, can you hear me?
Yep.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the point that I was just making before I get interrupted is that we know that genetics sometimes influence people's capacities. We know that sometimes environmental and circumstantial factors influence people's capacities. So you can't just claim that you positing a genetic explanation is a priori less complex an explanation than positing an environmental explanation, right? These seem equally simple, right? We both know that these are things that exist. And so if you're going to try to argue that your explanation is superior, you would try to have to appeal to some other theoretical virtue, like conformity with some empirical evidence that favors one explanation over the other, but you haven't really given anything like that.
Furthermore, we could also, like, the things about, like, for example, genetic traits like fast twitch muscle fibers is incredibly more like a genetic trait and not nearly as, I think there's a specific word for this. I'm not sure if it's multigenetic, but something of the sort, than a trait like, for example, like intelligence or whatever the civilization gene is. So, yeah, once again, just because genetics isn't like a monolith, all genetics isn't the same. There's a wide variation in the different types of genetics and how often they change and all these types of things. Genetics is complicated, and there's a reason why, experts on the field of genetics and organizations that study genetics specifically disavow like race realism and stuff like these and these types of explanations for what Mark is talking about here, because it lacks sufficient evidence.
Okay, so let me go to some of the other questions.
Except for the bell curve. Read the bell curve. And,
Yes, written by 2 people who have no degrees in genetics, by the way, just thought I'd point that out.
No, you see, because again, that book is simple, makes sense. What you're
Oh
saying
my
doesn't
God.
make sense. But carry on, Brittany.
So I'll write some like
That
what's it
book
called,
must be
bedtime
good.
stories
It's
for you, Mark,
got
and I'll send
words
them
I
over to
can
you, and they're
understand
gonna be
in
really
it.
simple, I promise, and maybe we can make some progress here on this issue.
Okay, so we had another question from the
Simple
thin
as.
red line saying, "Can the leftists name anything positive about multiculturalism, not food?"
I mean, oh, sorry, good.
No, you can go through.
Oh yeah, I mean, in terms of benefits of multiculturalism, I mean, it could just turn out to be like a temperamental thing. I mean, I think that like generally having access to a more diverse forms of, more diverse forms of media, more diverse forms of music, having more sort of cross pollination of ideas, people giving their different perspectives and having access to all of them, so that you can.
So my preferred way of answering this question is to assume your position is the default. Like, I like having access to whatever I want. I like it when people have the freedom to go and do what they want. Like, you have to sell to me why we should upend our entire immigration and economic system to keep millions of people out for reasons which have not been even remotely demonstrated or substantiated. Like, the multicultural position in the modern world is not the one that needs to be defended. It's the default one. Certainly in America.
And form a perspective that's informed by the as wide or as diverse a collection of ideas as possible. I think these are all generally like pretty good things.
We can have access to their media and music without them living in our country.
Well, I don't think that Black people would have created rock music if not in the U.S. That's not justification for bringing them over here. I'm just saying that in the way that we did, at least. I'm just saying that there are clearly forms of cultural cross-pollination that can happen when people are actually physically here that don't happen or to the same extent when it's just different cultures who are completely isolated in terms of their demographics and not immigrating to one another. And so on.
Yeah, I can give a bunch of more positives for
that was fine. I saw people. I said but that was fine.
Multiculturalism specifically. The question was.
What?
Every time Mark speaks, I can't.
I'm already joking. I've got a girlfriend.
Okay, okay, so I can answer some of the actual question being posed here for more advantages of multiculturalism as a whole. So there's been a lot of interesting. I'm gonna trigger Mark so much when I say this, but there's a lot of interesting scientific literature on the fact that more diverse classrooms, more diverse workplaces actually do lead to improved things like improved creativity and different ways of looking at things, and innovation, which lead to better outcomes in a wide range of different domains, whether that be company performance, whether that be grade attainment, and all the positives in education. That's one of the things.
The problem that I have with answers like this is that no racist is ever going to hear this laundry list. Like, these people are openly anti-statistics. They're anti-empiricism, No Nazi is going to hear this oh, wow, we can let the hated enemy, the plague of Black and brown people in because it'll give us 5% more workplace efficiency. These guys would accept any harm if it meant getting rid of the groups they hate. This was an audience question, though? Yeah, from their side, though. I'm assuming their audience... if anyone's being sold on this, it's the Nazis and their audience, right? That's the group that's trying to be reached. So things like this are never, ever, 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 ever going to be appealing. The main thing, I feel it's important to strike on a narrative here, and this is why I think it's really good to do the whole, there are real problems, but you're being lied to angle. Yeah, housing is too expensive. We are feeling more and more alienated in our communities. There are real problems going on. But dipshits like Mark Collett over here, whose brain starts to hurt every time he reads sentences longer than a few words, is not providing you the best solutions to these problems. Not getting your solutions to all the world's problems from the guy whose unironic argument in favor of his position, that it's simpler than a more complicated explanation. So, do not blame these issues on X or Y or whatever. I think the goal should be to transfer the anger and conspiracism that these Nazis feel from minorities over to other institutions, Or in other words, I don't think that a leftist who's basically just a Nazi who got told that instead of being mad at Jews, it's just capitalism, I don't think that makes a good leftist. There's a lot more work to be done there. A lot more work to be done there. But I do think it's a start. I think it's better than just hating the Jews, I think it's preferable. So you can work off that. Not supposed to stop. Well, the goal is basically just to direct their strong, emotions-driven political system in a more productive direction.
Things that we have about that. So innovation is one of the things we already mentioned previously. It is more beneficial towards promoting internationalism and global cooperation, which is very important, especially in, for example, the domains of trade. Things like circular migration, for instance, which is pretty part and parcel of multiculturalism, is one of the best, if not the best ways we have in order to be able to improve the economic development of countries all around the world, which I think is very important. And hey, if Mark Collett really loves black people, he should be in favor of circular immigration because that's the best way to build up those countries. I think it's very important. But yeah, overall, you know, things like there's also like a language benefit and the type of different things, how there's a lot of interesting literature from, for example, Noam Chomsky, how different languages can actually infer just like different ways of conceiving of the world and understanding of it and thinking about it in different ways, which kind of links back to the point about creativity and innovation. Like, we can go on for a really long time about this if we really want to, but yeah, here are some of the positives about multiculturalism that we got asked about.
Well, if you do like reports, I'll give you one thing. If you do like reports, you should read Putnam's study. Putnam's study reveals that immigration and diversity not only reduce social capital between ethnic groups, but also within ethnic groups themselves. Try reading that report.
Yeah, I actually have read that report, right? And do you know what the effect sizes are in Putnam's study?
Putnam writes, in colloquial language, people living in ethnically diverse settings.
In colloquial language, it is really funny how necessary it is for Mark Collett that nothing be written at above a 4th grade reading level. It's actually really, like, he's actually leaning into it, you know? I don't know if he's doing it deliberately as like a bit, like for comedy, but he keeps on like just making sure everyone here knows I am not smart. You know? I need things to be simple or I get upset. Like, okay. I mean, I prefer just oh, I lived. I prefer just making fun of you for it. You're kind of taking the fun out of it by just being that.
Anchor down.
Yeah, so
like a turtle. So there are reports.
Yeah, so a couple things, right? So firstly, with respect to Putnam's study, I mean, Putnam did find that the impact of diversity on social capital is statistically significant. It also happened to be negligible. So according to Putnam's study, diversity can only account for less than 1% of the observed variation in trust between regions. And so, like, an effect size that's like of that small implies that a country could go from like completely homogenous to having maximum possible diversity, and the level of trust would change by like not even 1% on like a 5-point scale, right? It's also worth noting that there was, according to Putnam, this negative impact of diversity on social cohesion decreases over time, and that diversity has other benefits which outweigh the initial negative impact on social capital. And about 7 years after that study was published, there was a meta-analysis which looked at like 90 studies which all tried to replicate Putnam, and the meta-analysis found that the majority of those studies failed to do so. So like,
damn, that's quite
and improving your
he didn't understand any of that shit, but that was good.
Okay, and so we had
that was good. Credit to Mouthy there.
The December 2020 report is the one Laura was talking about.
He didn't even have a response,
and 60% were set aside. Even then, only 30% of assaulters were white. Is there any debate that there's more homogenous society, the safer it is?
So I'm not sure. Everything that I was given by Laura to find out this is what she was talking about, every time I looked that up in the report, I got no hits about it. I mean, when it comes to specifically the last point was about safety and was it multiculturalist societies, or was the word that they used?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
In the question?
Yeah. The very last question.
Oh, it said in the last part of the question is there any debate that the more homogeneous a society is, the safer it is?
Yeah, so that's the thing that we've been kind of talking about this entire time, right? How homogeneity doesn't seem to be there seems to be a lot of the ways to be able to get at some of the perceived positive for homogeneity with diversity without any major issues. I mean, we talked about the things about social cohesion, about economic things, about unions, about university, about education, about segregation, stuff like that, and that's a way to kind of like get around them. But once again, asking this question is in itself a kind of like a loaded way or a very partisan way to do it, because like most things that happen societally, like most phenomena, like for example immigration, these things are multifaceted. There are two-sided, there are pros and cons to it. So a question that specifically asks just about the cons, you're going to miss out on a lot of the things there that makes it a positive thing. And that's why you need to have like a holistic analysis. And that's why, for example,
I don't know if this is a good response. I think it's important, again, you want that alternate narrative, like repeating over and over again, like, hey, it's complicated, you can't just jump to assumptions, isn't going to work with an audience that's like predisposed for retardation like Nazis. I think that like the other narrative is important. The main contributor to crime, the main stat that predicts it, is income inequality. Not poverty, not race, income inequality. Areas that have lots of wealthy people and lots of poor people. That is what causes the most crime. Pretty easy to imagine why, right? You know, like You think of like why crime happens. It's not just, you know, stealing wealthy people's shit, though that is a good part of it. A lot of it is also that areas like that tend to be cities that have like high population density. You know, the implements and accessories to crime are more present usually in areas with high population density. There's a lot of stuff like that.
Me and Mouthy have to take that, hey, we can recognize some of the negatives that might come from migration if there aren't infrastructural things in place in order to handle it properly. But our prescription is nevertheless, there are a lot of positives that are fairly unique to it, and we should try to capitalize on them as much as possible while minimizing as many of the negatives.
Do the wealthy actually have more crimes committed to them? Oh, no.
Right, and
no.
So from
Poor people are more likely to be the victim of crimes.
Godzilla, I said, not a question. Just wanted to say hi to Mark and the 4 ladies. Sorry, guys. Okay. From Nick Van, he said, observable reality shows that Pakistanis are not British. Pakistanis have a home called Pakistan. That is where they belong with their own people. End of story.
You know what, Matthew, you know what we should do next time? We should debate this observable reality figure. It seems to have a lot of interesting literature and stuff posted on this that we're not aware of. Can you set us up, Brittany? Can you set us up with the debate with observable reality next?
Sure.
If they aren't meant to be in Pakistan, then why are they called Pakistanis, eh?
I'm sure you would,
These two clowns, having these two soy-filled disgraces live in a multi-ethnic ghetto and following them around, watching them get harassed, picked on, and bullied by...
I don't know what you're talking about. Black people love me.
Dude, I'm telling you, Mark Collett got bullied by black jock chads in high school. Come on. So much of what he says makes sense if you think of it that way. So much of this. Love to see Tyrone give you a wedgie. Fucking God. I mean, the funny thing, like, it really is like that, okay? There's a reason why, Poll, like the racist 4chaners, why they're so obsessed with interracial cuckold porn, okay? It's not a joke. Like, I make fun when I say, yeah, white supremacists all, like, fantasize about getting cucked by giant black dick. This has been a thing for centuries, okay? Back when they would lynch slaves in the South, like, they would often castrate the male slaves as well, because of the perceived fear that the white women would fall for their sexual wiles, okay? You know? Like, they were both narratives. Like, one narrative was the black men are going to rape all the white women, which, of course, didn't happen, like, because they were slaves. It just didn't come up that often, I suppose. And then you had the other narrative, which is that the devilish sexual prowess of the black man would attract the white women and seduce them, and that the white women had to be protected, hence the anger at black men's penises. What I'm getting at here is that racists are incredibly insecure, like ridiculously insecure, you know? Can confirm every third porn thread on 4chan is a black thread. Oh yeah, literally, they're obsessed with it. They're completely obsessed with it. They're completely, absolutely, 100% just, they're fucking obsessed with it, you know? And it's very, very, very funny.
True.
Phil.
True.
Every black person loves me. I don't know what you're talking about.
A warm feeling of contentment.
All right, so question for Mouthy and Rose. Do you believe Wakanda is real?
Yes.
I would need to see a study on that.
I would need to see observable reality's take on that.
Okay. What was this one that just came in? And so from biggest... No, I'm not coming on. Have these two faux intellectuals ever heard of quantitative genetics? You don't need to isolate a specific gene to show something has a genetic origin or has significant heritability. And it is never just one gene either.
So what they're talking about here, I think, is GWAS, genetic wide association studies. And once again, I mean, the thing with GWAS, which tends to be a common trend as well, I see now in just the general argumentative style and rhetoric and mechanization of the opposition in this conversation, is that GWAS studies are not good at all at providing causality. They're merely illustrations of correlatory factors that exist within the populations.
Keep in mind, again, that genetic, something having a genetic origin or it being, what's the term, heritable, doesn't necessarily, first of all, heritable doesn't necessarily mean genetic, and genetic doesn't necessarily mean heritable, and it doesn't necessarily mean intrinsic either. Like the GWAS studies, it's there's a lot of correlative work there. It's more retard shit.
an excellent
saying
video
it a lot
that I'm
today.
gonna deploy my channel here.
They're very dumb. They're very
The
stupid.
specific video is a debunk of a Ubersoy video on this type of thing, where I bring in geneticist Kevin Bird, PhD geneticist, to talk about these types of things, and he explains the issues with genome-wide association studies better than I ever could. But yeah, genome-wide association studies are by no means that irrefutable proof of like race realism or whatever. A lot of people don't understand what they mean, and they also have some significant shortfallings, which is the reason why geneticists don't just say, okay, well, obviously race realism is real because GWAS, right? That's why we have people on the internet comment section saying that instead.
And I don't think that objection that they gave really like speaks to anything that we've said, right? I think the only point at which the genetic thing was brought up was that Mark claimed that his explanation for the differences and success between different civilizations is simpler than ours. And my point was just like, well, no, I mean, we know that genetics sometimes influences people's circumstance. We know that environment sometimes does it. So both of these are like already existing parts of like our ontology. So neither explanation has a disadvantage in that they're positing something new to our ontology and is therefore less simple, right? And so if you want to establish that your explanation is better, you'd have to appeal to some other sort of evidence. But I don't think that's been done, and just saying it's less simple is inadequate. Now, whether or not, like, I don't think I ever, at least I didn't ever intend to claim that it's like just one gene that causes these things. I mean, that just doesn't, I guess that just doesn't really speak to my point.
All right, really quick, because we're going to go into closing statements. I'm going to give each person like 2 minutes each to give your final thoughts and to shout out your channel and where they can find you. So, Mouthy,
what's Mark Kohler going to shout out?
Wait, wait, hold on. Can we go, because they got the first, they got the opening and they got the closing as well on the opening statements.
I'm going to go back and forth.
Okay, sure, we can do that.
All right, so Mouthy, why don't you go?
Okay, so
I
guess my takeaway from this debate, I mean, it was reasonable at points when we were talking to Laura. Every time Mark butted in, he just kind of rambled about nothing and didn't really address anything that any of us had said. And then, I mean, there were like, I mean, broadly speaking, with respect to the engagements with Mark, I mean, it didn't really say anything interesting. Every time he brought up like a study or a statistic, as soon as we looked into it a little bit more, or if we had prior knowledge about the study he was referencing, it just completely collapsed. Then every time we would reference a study, he would have no prior knowledge of the study or would not make any attempt to look into it, but would nonetheless just say that it's funded by George Soros and it's fake. So basically, studies are okay to reference when they support his point, but then when you look into them, they actually don't. Studies aren't okay and not worth looking into if they support a conclusion that's contrary to his conclusion. So I mean, yeah, like the basic approach has just been completely bad faith, completely pseudo-intellectual. Every time me or Roserist has been presented with something that we weren't familiar with, at least I know this has been true of me, like I've owned up to it and I've said, I'll look into this later, or this isn't something I've researched, and I'll have to look into the studies that you're presenting, because that's how like people who are interested in like figuring out what is true go about new information that they haven't been presented with before. It's obviously the case that Mark is like a clearly motivated bad faith actor who doesn't really understand any of the topics that he talks about. That's pretty much it.
All right, Laura.
Oh, God.
Okay. Well, it's been fun. I'm not really sure if anyone has benefited from this conversation. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with Mark that we don't need a study for everything. You can Google something and say, is there a study to prove this, and find one, and then you can find a study that says the opposite. And I think, you know, whether the fact that people being demographically replaced in their own homeland is a good thing or a bad thing, I think it's just common sense that it's a bad thing, and I don't think we should have to have a study to prove that. But yeah, it's been fun. And
so in terms of like hitting the closing statement here, I really just feel like you need to basically just shame the audience here. Like these people claim to be the defenders of the white race and Western civilization, but there is no intellectual of England that would not spit in their faces after listening to this, like of the past 500 years. Like, this is embarrassing, right? Like, is this the civilization you're defending? Well, this is simple, so this must be right. Oh, like studies say this or that, so like, I don't know. Let's just go with vibes. Like, that's what you're dealing with here. You know, that's like the level we're on. Phenomenal. You know, I basically, like, I think challenge them to do better. Like, hey, listen, I'm sure that you're buried pretty deep in this fucking narrative, and I'm sure you're very invested in it, but you're wrong. You're evidently wrong. Your greatest champions, their best argument is to not use studies, to just not do that. Yeah, so maybe we can all do a little better, huh? Something like that. I'm rambling a bit, but you get what I'm talking about.
That's all I have to say. I'm on Telegram and Odyssey and Gab if anyone wants to check me out. But thank you.
Okay. Rose?
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of disappointing. Really, we just seemed like we argued against two pawns in this discussion. It seems like the main thing that we really should have been arguing with should be we need to have a 2v2 debate against common sense and observable reality, and then we'll actually get to the core of this argument, because right now we just appeal to people that was, you know, yeah, they were referring to something
that's
which
good.
Seems to be very innocuous. Maybe they're a person, maybe we can talk about them, but yeah, we'll probably run it that way instead. I mean, overall, when it comes to stuff like this, we have been perfectly willing to accept the factual elements of this conversation, the descriptive grounds. However, what always seems to be the issue with these types of things is that we run into issues when it comes to the opposition having to make any prescriptive statements, and we run into issues with them being able to meet the burden of proof for the things that they propagate. Don't get it wrong, things like the Great Replacement absolutely carry a connotation, have historically been used in order to signal the fact that this is happening because of an anti-white, kind of like, elite that's doing these things with intent. However, because that's very hard to defend, we saw that be jumped off, moved away from immediately by the opposition in this conversation as a whole. When it comes to the second part of the argument about whether or not we should preserve racial demographics, from the case that we've made here in this discussion and from other general things that we can talk about, we still haven't been provided a case for why racial demographics in themselves have inherent value. It seems that through policies which we didn't even get to discuss about how this would be done, which probably we would have, and we probably would have had a few spicy takes being dropped here and there about how to preserve these racial demographics or how to change them in a way that is more palpable to the opposition here. But regardless, when it comes to these types of things, in order to be able to preserve these racial demographics, even looking aside from the prescriptions from the opposition, we lose out on a lot of well-established positives that come with migration, that come with especially things like circular migration and even the cultural effects on, for example, things like migration and stuff like that. But unfortunately, whenever we try to talk about those, we got called soy because it's a literature review, or like a literature or like a scientific study. So there wasn't really much we could do on this situation. At the end of the day, we can just proclaim the exact same thing that the opposition have been proclaiming, that all our understanding of this is based on common sense and observable reality. And because there's nothing we can both appeal to, because the opposition doesn't seem to appeal to the standards of intellectualism or academic rigor, we're just endlessly locked in a deadlock. Hence why we prefer to default to things like academia and like intellectual standard in order to have these conversations so we can actually get anywhere. But yeah, I've been Roserist. If you want to find out more about me or what I do and my main content, I would check me out on YouTube. Same title, Roserist, 2 words. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mark.
Well, thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. As you can see, we were asked to debate 2 things. The first is the Great Replacement happening? Everyone agreed. We said it was. They said it was. White people are becoming a minority in their ancestral homelands, all the nations their forefathers founded. The thing that we couldn't agree on is obviously whether that's a good thing. I think we have put forward plenty of very, very strong arguments that show that mass immigration and demographic replacement have impacted people of European descent in a negative way. And if you are someone living in the West, if you're watching this, you should do everything in your power to prevent any further immigration into your country. You should get on board in some form of activity, some form of nationalist activity, some patriotic activity to push back against this. Because things are bad now. They're going to get worse as mass immigration continues. And it's very interesting to see that the people we were debating, they can't argue in good faith. They can't talk about things in the way normal people speak about them. Everything has to be backed up with some obscure study. There always has to be a 2,000-page report to explain why something which is observably true is actually happening for another reason.
They wanted me to prove my point. That's bad faith.
Ethnicity or culture, which is obviously absolute nonsense. Now, I will say this. I have been entertained by tonight's show, and I hope you have too. I think Soy Squared are an excellent duo. Limp Wrist and the Infidel. They have entertained
you can come
me
up with a good name for me.
You just took half his name, Mark. Be more creative. Come on.
They have been entertaining, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, people of European descent, they do have the right to exist. They do have a right to remain a supermajority in their ancestral homeland. And if they do become a minority, they will lose everything, and they won't be treated well. They will be treated as a hated and despised minority who will be blamed for all of the failings that the multicultural society has created. Thank you, guys. Find me on BitChute, find me on Odyssey, find me on Telegram, find me on Gab. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Brittany. Thank you to the chat. If you enjoyed this and you think me and Laura owned Soy Squared, give us a 1 in the chat, guys. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are doing our cozy inaugural show.
Thank you. Every single person in his audience thinks that he performed well. Yeah. There we go. I don't think that Roserist and Mouthy Infidel did badly there. My current thing is so obviously when it comes to discourse, the obvious outcome of any discourse is to benefit more from the conversation you had than your opposition, assuming you two are enemies, right? we know this because we don't like the fact that the anti-work moderator went on Fox News and in that engagement, made their side look far worse than I guess the concept of working came across. Obviously you want to come across looking better. And the issue is that Nazis are subhuman. All the faculties of reason I was blessed with by God were endowed not to them. They are darkened in all senses. They are just utterly beneath us in every imaginable way. To speak to them, to deign to speak to them, is a gift which they do not deserve in most cases. For the most part, I have taken a policy to avoid conversations with people who I feel like basically my threshold is this. If I could have a conversation with somebody and ruin everything about them, and they could come away from that still feeling good because the engagement they got from talking to me was worth that, and their audience was too stupid to know or care anyway, then I won't have that conversation. Because there's literally no point. There's no audience to convince, there's no points to really win on in terms of like the perceptive, sense. It's just, it's just attention for them. You know what I mean? It would be like somebody with a politics show, like, bringing on for a serious debate somebody whose shtick is that they have a blowhorn and they just like toot it really loud. But yeah. Now, I don't think this really applies to Rose Wrist and Mouth the Infidel because they're nowhere near my size, which means I think they have a lot more freedom than I do. You know what I mean? And I think it's good, and they're both smart, whatever differences there may be. They're certainly not unintelligent, and I think it's good for them to have these conversations. Also, it's also kind of an imbalance in our favor because, and I hope this doesn't come across as condescending to Mouth the Infidel and Rose Wrist because that's not my intent at all. But Mark Collette, before he got banned, had a big YouTube channel, didn't he? Something like 500,000. I mean, he had videos with hundreds of thousands of views. Rose Wrist and Mouth the Infidel are combined far, 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 far smaller than Mark Collette was at his peak, possibly by an order of magnitude, which means that in a way it's kind of like a fall for him. I mean, obviously he's gotten banned from a bunch of platforms, and that contributes to his to his current social state. But you understand what I'm talking about, right? At any rate, I don't think Rose Wrist and Mouth the Infidel did a bad job. I think that with conversations like that, it really, ultimately it comes down to stupid fucking rhetoric games. I think it comes down to condescension and being jovial, not getting more angry than them, stuff like that. Yeah, it's good. Have you seen the Mr. Medicare versus Nick Fuentes debate? I feel like it's representative as to how far-right debates function. No, but I can understand how it would have gone. I'm loading it in my head right now, and I know for a fact that I can get like I feel like the version of that debate in my head and the version of the debate that exists in reality, if both run through a plagiarism checker, would like get a red flag, They just call each other Jews for 2 hours. Yeah, exactly. That's what would happen if Fuentes ever debated me, which I guess he's too much of like a pussy to just like hop on stream sometime, That the reason why the Fuentes debate has taken so long is because like he wants to make a big fucking show out of it. Like he wants this whole debate set up with big opening statements or whatever. But like he just wants to call me a Jew, like a fat Jew for 2 hours, So like if he hops on, I'm doing a game stream, like if it gets boring, I just like kick him out. Like I don't care. They want fanfare because that gives them way more pomp and circumstance to promote their own brand. But my brand doesn't rely on me bringing on like retards, so I can do whatever I want. I'll survive. Wait, please. This area is hard, and my iframes are so weak. He's banned from D Live. Wait, when did he get banned from D Live? What do you have to do to get banned from D Live? He must have been Jew posting there.